Chapter 320. Why? In his primordial spirit, Aya's serious question could not be evaded. Why do you have to weave such a set of lies? Aya was Aya, the proud Night King, who would not hide her identity in front of anyone. When she returned to her hometown from the 9 regions, she was ready to face everything in the past, so she didn't need a fake identity to hide anything. Wang Lu sighed. This is not the time for you to show off. It's good to bravely reveal your identity, but do you think Bedivere can accept it? Do you really want your faithful love to break his cognitive world and blow his head? Wang Lu said, believe me, if you insist on claiming that the Night King is a soft girl, Bedivere will definitely kill himself in front of you. Thinking of Bedivere's one-track mind, Aya could do nothing about it. Moreover, do you really think it's a good thing to announce the identity of the Night King? Aya asked, what do you want to say? You've been in Bretonia for some time now, and we can see that the people of this land miss you very much. However, after 100 years of brewing, this nostalgia has reached the point of limitless beautification. It's as if the Night King in those days was perfect, omnipotent, and invincible. Aya laughed. Invincible, that's not wrong. Then why are you still looking for a way to win the war? Why don't you just write a diary so that future generations can admire your political and military achievements? The more you experience war, the more you can see your own shortcomings. But back to the point, what do you think is wrong with the people of Bretonia's nostalgia for me? Excessive beautification will make people unable to accept the reality. If people realize that the perfect king in their fantasy is, in reality, a waste that can't even cook fish-flavored shredded pork, how disappointed would they be? Do you have a problem with my fish-flavored shredded pork? Wang Lu also said, not to mention your current spirit of the brave departed physique, your strength is greatly reduced. Even dealing with a faceless one requires a sneak attack. You simply cannot afford to have too high of an expectation. So, instead of disappointing your followers, it's better to appear as the daughter of the Night King and lower their expectations. That way, even if you're lacking compared to the Night King, people will still understand you, support you, and love you because you're the daughter of the Night King. Aya was stunned for a moment. Is that so? I seem to understand what you mean. Speaking of which, my feelings are really complicated. I've returned to my homeland, and yet I have to play the role of my own daughter. Wang Lu smiled and said, speaking of which, I'm friends with the Night King. Shouldn't you consider calling me uncle in the future? If you seek death, you will die, Wang Lu. However, Aya was not interested in arguing with Wang Lu over this verbal battle. It was almost time for her to take a break, and it was time for her to shoulder her responsibilities. After ending their conversation in the sky, Wang Lu, Aya, and Bedivere, the 3 of them, did not immediately land because the battle in Dragon City was not over. Although on the battlefield, the situation has been completely reversed. After losing Faceless One, Holy Light Religion was like a group of dragons without a leader, their morale was in chaos. In particular, the archons who were responsible for the battlefield command stopped operating, which made the morale of the Holy Light Religion army even more chaotic. The priests and holy knights were at a loss, scurrying around the battlefield like headless flies. At the same time, the death of Faceless One, moreover, he was beheaded by Aya in front of everyone, which was a fatal blow to the morale of the Holy Light Religion. Looking down from above, they could clearly see the hesitation and fear in the eyes of the Holy Light Religion believers. Even the almost omnipotent Faceless One was beheaded by the Dragon City guards, who knew how many cards they were hiding. And once a new situation occurred, who else could lead them out of the predicament? For decades, the Holy Light Religion in Dragon City mostly relied on the Archbishop Rowan. Later on, Faceless One appeared and suppressed everything with an absolutely strong stance. However, now that Faceless One was dead and the Archbishop defected, the Holy Light Religion believers were suddenly at a loss. However, although Holy Light Religion suffered a fatal blow, they, after all, still occupied an absolute numerical advantage. Previously, in the last defensive circle, the Dragon City guards suffered a heavy loss, which further widened the gap between them and the Holy Light Religion. Now, it was nearly 6 or 7 times. In this case, a little carelessness might lead to a capsized ship in the gutter. Not to mention that just now, the sudden appearance of the Caliban and the killing of Faceless One by Aya were also a great shock to the Dragon City guards, which also dispersed their fighting spirit. And now, what she had to do was to regroup the Dragon City guards and completely establish the victory. Feeling that her body has slightly recovered her strength, Aya struggled to break free from the embrace of Wang Lu and stood in the air relying on her own strength. Her eyes swept the ground, looking valiant and formidable, which complemented the splendor of the Caliban. With a new identity, Aya actually had a lot to say, but at this moment, there was no time for a long speech. Fortunately, as a former ruler, she was very clear about how to effectively use her time. I am the daughter of the Night King, the legitimate successor of Bretonia. In the name of the Caliban, defeat the enemy in front of me and pick the fruit of victory. With that, Aya waved the Caliban, and the golden light pointed straight ahead. It was a simple action, but it seemed to contain an incredible magic. Looking at the direction where Aya's sword was pointing, a strong surge of excitement surged in the heart of every Bretonia person. It was a memory that came from the depths of their bloodline. In a trance, people seemed to see rows of knights in shining silver armor riding on spirited horses. They held long swords that were polished to the point of not even a speck of dust could be seen in their hands, and sharp dragon spears were fixed on their saddles. In front of them, there were 10 times and 100 times more enemies, like a black tide. However, the knights looked solemn, and their fighting spirit was unwavering. And in front of the knights, a flawless knight waved his sword high, pointing straight ahead. Knights, charge! After 100 years, that battle cry once again exploded in their ears. The Dragon City guards only felt that in their exhausted bodies, their limbs and bones gave birth to infinite strength. Following the direction of the stone sword, they began to run, began to charge. Respond to the call of the king, defeat all enemies that stood in their way. In a trance, the once world-shaking night charge once again appeared in the world. Dragon City guards turned into a sharp knife, deeply piercing into the Holy Light Religion's formation. The final battle finally began, but the result of the battle was already clear at a glance. At the forefront of the battlefield, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and Quan Zouhua separately pierced into the enemy's formation, quickly harvesting lives with their own means. 36, 37, 38, Lu Li simultaneously controlled more than 10 flying swords, shuttling back and forth on the battlefield like a gust of lightning. Wherever she went, it was like a sickle cutting wheat, taking away a piece of life. The girl also muttered something, carefully counting her own achievements, for fear of making a mistake. And beside her, there was a reign of terror. In fact, when Aya waved the Caliban, launching the night charge after 100 years, the outcome of this war has already been determined. There was no need for the several people to deliberately do anything. The Dragon City guards with boiling morale were enough to tear the enemy into pieces. However, Lu Li did not forget Wang Lu's entrustment. They were still carrying a difficult task, to collect 999 roses watered with the blood of middle-order professions of Holy Light Religion. And this Dragon City battle was the best opportunity to harvest them. In addition to Dragon City, there was no other place in the entire Bretonia that could gather nearly 1,000 middle-order professions. If they didn't kill them now, when would they? In terms of strength, Lu Li was not at the forefront in the Dragon City battlefield. However, in terms of the ability to kill in a chaotic battle, few could compare to her. The Holy Light Religion's morale completely collapsed under the successive blows. They scattered in all directions, without any resistance. Lu Li's high explosive and high mobility advantage was immediately brought into full play. In a moment, Lu Li almost killed her way through the Holy Light Religion's formation. More than 40 middle-order professions died under her sword. As for the rest of the low-order professions, they were countless. However, the girl just stood there for a moment, adjusted her breathing, and then once again turned into a rainbow light and began a new round of killing. According to her senior brother, this battle was the best opportunity to increase her achievement. Once she missed it, she didn't know when there would be a second time. Although the specific explanation was somewhat incomprehensible, Luli at least remembered the most critical point. If you kill 100 people, I will let you eat all the delicacies in Bretonia. With this sentence, Luli had endless motivation to act. In her eyes, the ones who were fleeing in panic were not the priests, holy knights, or the inquisitors, but the fragrant and delicious finger-sucking chicken. Well, that's a good mentality. While Luli was flying on her flying sword, a strange voice suddenly rang in her ears. While killing, your heart can actually be so calm. Is this the special mind cultivation technique of you 9 regions people? Luli looked around in surprise but didn't find the speaker. However, feeling that there was no hostility in the voice, she seriously replied, I don't understand what you're talking about. The voice laughed and then asked, do you know that you're killing people? I know, it's obvious. Senior brother said that if I kill 100 people, I'll get a reward. Haha, so for you, killing is just a game? The voice said, do you know that each of the dead under your sword is a living being? They have their own life, their own ideals, and their own loved ones. You see the priest with short red hair at the rear left. His name is Kyle, 25 years old this year. He is a talented priest from the countryside. He came to the big city to do odd jobs for the high-order priest in order to accumulate wealth as soon as possible. Because in his hometown, he has a woman that he has been secretly in love with for many years. He planned to propose to her after this battle. The girl actually likes him and has been looking forward to his return. She vowed that the two of them would get married and have children, and live together until their hair turns white. Unfortunately, because of your sword strike just now, all of this is impossible. Oh. Luli let out an oh sound and continued to look for the next target. That girl with long brown hair, Lee, is the lead singer of the church choir. She is very beautiful, and her voice is very pleasant to hear. Although her character is somewhat vain and delicate, she's actually a devout and kind girl. Every rest day, she would carefully take care of the stray cats outside the church, and then watch the believers who come to the church to worship. She actually likes a talented bard. Although the latter is only a civilian, his singing always intoxicated her. The development of the relationship between these two people is destined to be bumpy, but also destined to be touching. Unfortunately, all of this has been ended by you. People will never be able to appreciate Lee's singing again, and the bard will never know that there is a beautiful girl who secretly likes him. The soft voice cleverly changed its tone, enticing Luli to involuntarily immerse herself in the story, to appreciate the sadness of the story, to involuntarily surge with remorse and other emotions. Luli was indeed somewhat immersed in it. Her killing action became slower and slower, and eventually, she simply stopped, with a puzzled expression on her face. That being the case, Luli puzzledly asked, why would Holy Light religion let them join the battlefield? Isn't it cruel? Luli said, somewhat annoyed. I understand. You want to tell me that Holy Light religion is cruel and inhumane, that they have no bottom line and have harmed many people's lives, right? Very well, I will kill these Holy Light religion believers to avenge the dead people. That voice exclaimed, wait a minute, don't you think your logic is a bit strange? Luli, on the other hand, turned into a ray of light and left. Chapter 321. The war continued until nightfall before it finally came to an end. Unsurprisingly, Dragon City Guards won a complete victory. Since Faceless One was beheaded by Aya, the war actually turned into a one-sided massacre. The Holy Light believers were completely routed, scattering from the center of the military camp area. Dragon City Guards, under the guidance of the Caliban, pursued them all the way. Wrapped in the previous resentment in their heart, they didn't let anyone escape. Finally, they chased them for hundreds of miles outside the city before they gradually stopped. At this point, most of the Holy Light believers who participated in the war were dead. The elites that Holy Light religion accumulated in Bretonia for hundreds of years were gone. The city was covered with rivers of blood. The originally neat and tidy streets were now covered with blood, and everywhere were the bodies of priests in holy robes. At the same time, the fierce fighting would inevitably hurt some innocent people, Not all the civilians were evacuated from the city. There were always some who suffered undeserved disasters. For a time, the smell of blood assailed the nostrils in Dragon City, and the sound of crying shook the sky. The nature of war was cruel. No one was surprised by this scene, because if the winner of this war was Holy Light religion, they would not be lenient to Dragon City guards, and would certainly set off a great purge. Therefore, even though many people could not bear to see this massacre, they were inconvenient to say anything. For example, the former Archbishop Rowan, who was in a very awkward situation, fell into a deep contradiction. As a former archbishop, he belonged to the church camp, but later on, his identity as a member of the Priory of Zion was revealed, and thus became the sworn enemy of Holy Light religion. In line with the principle that the enemy of the enemy is a friend, in the final stage of the massacre, Dragon City guards never aimed at Rowan. Of course, this was also related to Luo Wan's good karma with the Dragon City guards for decades. In the entire city, Luo Wan's reputation was very good. Even the Dragon City guards were not willing to lay their hands on such an old man. However, for Rowan himself, it was difficult to accept this leniency, because too many people died. As the regional archbishop, Rowan has always regarded the believers of Dragon City as his own children. But now, these children have all become corpses. Did they do something wrong? No, because they never had a choice. When Faceless One's tyrannical power was monstrous, they could not be expected to resist directly. And when the war began, everyone was helpless. They did nothing wrong, yet they died a violent death. And could this be said to be the fault of the Dragon City guards? Obviously not. Compared to the Holy Light believers, they were actually more innocent. The Holy Sword of Judgment fell from the sky, and then the Holy Light religion army surrounded the general barracks. From the beginning to the end, did the Dragon City guards have a choice? Faceless One was naturally the main culprit, and he, as the archbishop, failed to protect everyone, which was also a great dereliction of duty. What right did he have to continue living after such a dereliction of duty? In fact, Archbishop Rowan once thought of suicide. Although the doctrine of Holy Light religion strictly forbade this kind of behavior, in desperation, he had no choice. However, a certain young man who claimed to be the spokesperson of the Saintess found him and made him give up on the idea with just one sentence. Your life is no longer your own. If you feel guilty, then use your dying years to atone for your sins with practical actions. Death is just an escape. Only by living on bravely can one better face the dead. Luo Wan sighed and finally had nothing to say. In addition to Rowan, everyone needed to face the rest of their lives bravely. After a fierce battle, both sides could be said to be mutually wounded. Although Dragon City guards won, their loss was not much better than that of Holy Light religion. Only half of the people survived, and many of them had lost their fighting ability forever. However, the entire Dragon City also suffered a huge loss. In the final stage of the war, countless buildings were destroyed. Many Holy Light believers took advantage of the danger to defend themselves, and the response of Dragon City guards was to directly demolish the buildings along with the people. In the process, it was inevitable that civilians were injured. That night, Bedivere floated in the air, silently overlooking his city. Although today's Dragon City had not yet fallen into ruins, but the work of the last few decades seemed to have been done in vain. But, in the end, we won. Bedivere closed his eyes. This is a dreamlike victory. I never even thought about what to do next after this victory. Ha ha ha. A hearty laughter sounded beside Bedivere. The next step is, of course, to continue to win until Bretonia is reunified and Holy Light religion is completely expelled. After half a day of calming himself down, Bedivere has developed a high immunity to such bold words. Not to mention that the person who spoke was not the monarch that he was determined to serve, but a mysterious 9 regions cultivator. Therefore, Bedivere didn't show too much respect. It's easy to say, but Holy Light religion will not easily give up. The next battle may break out at any time, and we only have a weary army. Looking around, we don't even have a single ally. This battle was indeed a miraculous victory, but the next situation was even more dangerous. The church has suffered a heavy loss that has never been seen in thousands of years, so how could they be willing to give up? Even if at this time they were in dire straits with the eastern city-states, they would certainly allocate their energy to deal with the rebellion in Dragon City. Compared to the ruins of Dragon City, which had almost no fighting power, Holy Light religion had much more abundant resources. After 100 years of operation, most of the forces in Bretonia have a connection with Holy Light religion. As long as they promised enough benefits, with the prestige and credibility of the #1 church in the continent, naturally, there would be people willing to be their pawn. Merely these jackals and wolves that might become the church's lackeys made Bedivere not dare to take them lightly. Moreover, Dragon City was too rich. Whether it was the equipment and ancient books for professions, or the gold and silver for ordinary people, Dragon City's accumulation was far beyond the reach of other cities. Now that both sides had suffered in the war, it was simply a naked temptation. Right now, if we are even a little bit careless, we will be attacked by a group, and we haven't even dealt with our own affairs. After a fierce battle, in addition to silently licking their wounds, Dragon City also had to face a critical problem: morale. In the previous day's fierce battle, Dragon City guards were basically united. Except for a few people who were coerced by Holy Light religion into defecting, most of them burst out with amazing cohesion. However, that was an instinctive response to seek self-preservation in a disaster. When the war was over and the crisis was lifted, the contradiction would inevitably be exposed. People could see the dangerous situation that Dragon City was facing. Right now, Dragon City guards could be said to have escaped from the jaws of death, but no one wanted to die again. Today's battle has repaid the favor of Dragon City for nurturing us. Next, do we need to continue to tie ourselves to Dragon City and wait for death? Yes, I just went out of the city to investigate, and there are already troops from other cities slowly gathering. Seriously, I don't think we can fight anymore. Such a voice quickly spread inside Dragon City, shaking the morale of the army. At the same time, for the ordinary people of Dragon City, this was also a restless night. Inside the city, the bloodstains had yet to disappear, and the murderous aura of Dragon City guards was still there. In the Cathedral of Holy Light religion, the light was dim. Outside the city, no one knew how many forces were eyeing them. Although the war was over, it could break out again at any time. The air inside the city was filled with a palpitating smell. And at this time, someone needed to come forward to stabilize the people's heart and suppress the situation. Aya stood on the square in the center of Dragon City. Under her feet, there was a tower that was pulled out of thin air by a spell, which allowed her to look down and have a panoramic view of the whole city. The bleak atmosphere inside Dragon City was also clear at a glance. In this regard, Aya just faintly opened her mouth, but her voice resounded inside and outside Dragon City. 150 years ago, it was also here that my father once led his own army to prepare for the final battle that was about to come. His opponent is the largest and last great lord of Bretonia. The savage lord has done many evil deeds, and the people are boiling with resentment. However, he colluded with foreign races, his power is monstrous, and his army is at its peak. But my father's army has just experienced 3 fierce battles, suffered heavy losses, and has become a weary army. The clear and piercingly cold voice was like the cold wind at night, which made people forget their troubles and focus their attention on the voice on the high platform, listening to the young girl's speech. At this time, people already knew the identity of the blonde girl, the daughter of the legendary Night King who died more than 100 years ago. Holding the stone sword, inheriting the will of the late king, the successor of Bretonia's royal power. These dazzling titles could not really appease people's hearts. In the face of an imminent crisis, the gradually forgotten king seemed pale and powerless. After all, she was just a seemingly fragile little girl. Moreover, shortly after killing Faceless One, she fell into a deep sleep. Then, the little girl finally woke up. Was she going to speak in front of everyone? Although this was not a good time to listen to the story, when Aya opened her mouth, the Dragon City guards could not help but be interested. For most of them, the Night King's 12 battles to unify Bretonia was just a sentence in the story, and the specific content was not clear to them. And in people's cognition, the invincible Night King naturally advanced triumphantly all the way, with no enemy under his command. However, at this time, before the last battle, the Night King seemed to be in a desperate situation. In fact, the situation 150 years ago was indeed desperate. At that time, the Night King won 3 consecutive fierce battles to subdue Dragon City and led the army to rest in the city. At this time, the Savage Lord, who had always been entrenched in a corner of Bretonia, took advantage of the situation and proposed the condition of dividing the world equally. If the Night King did not agree, the Savage Lord's army would submerge Dragon City and eliminate the Night King. At that time, the number of available soldiers of the Night King was nearly 10 times that of the opponent. On the high platform, Aya was neither happy nor sad, narrating her own story from another perspective. That night, his camp was also filled with all kinds of voices. The spies of the desolate overlord who had infiltrated the camp were spreading fear. The soldiers who had followed blindly were panicking and at a loss. The hearts of the veterans who had been through many battles were shaken. Dragon City, which had just surrendered, was watching coldly from the sidelines. Even the Knights of the Round Table began to argue endlessly. Illicit relations, retreat, temporarily avoid the sharp edge, as if there was a bottomless abyss in front of them that they could not advance even an inch. Hearing this, many people felt the same way and began to talk about it. Because if it was them, if they knew that the opponent had 10 times the number of troops, they would also hesitate and fear, just like, now. In the face of an evenly matched opponent, one bravely moved forward. That was courage. If it was 2 or 3 times, it would be suspected of being reckless, but if it was more than 10 times, it was simply seeking one's own death. So how did the Night King solve the problem at that time? 10 times the number of enemies. Could it be that he used some means to delay the time and recuperate before pressing forward with his army? Although people were also very clear that with the Night King's character, he would never easily compromise with the enemy, let alone the Savage Lord who believed in evil and killed countless people, but what else could he do if he did not compromise? If the situation at that time was really as bad as Aya said, there would be no chance of winning in a frontal battle. Unconsciously, people were deeply attracted by Aya's short story and began to be immersed in it. Perhaps, this story was really too immersive. Looking at the countless pairs of vacant eyes under the high platform, Aya gently raised her head to hide her eyes filled with emotion. 150 years had passed, but everything seemed to have happened yesterday. The situation was exactly the same. After restraining the agitation in her heart, Aya slowly opened her mouth. Her voice carried a faint majesty that made people's hearts palpitate. Who are we? Are we stray dogs? Or are we scavenging vultures? Are we the cockroaches lurking in the sewers? Or are we the stooped mice in the dark? No, we are the proud lions, the warriors blessed by the Breton dragon clan, the Bretonia knights that will always stand in the land of glory. Our principles are unity, courage, unbending, and unwavering uprightness. We will never negotiate with the demons, and will never bow to the Savage Lord. Because if we abandon our code, we will betray all the friends who bless us and protect us. We will betray the comrades who paved the road to victory with their lives in the past war. Because we have promised them, and even promised ourselves, that we will always face forward, bravely move forward, even if there is a bottomless abyss under our feet. But, my knights, do not be timid, do not despair, because under our feet is the glorious road to victory. We are the chosen masters of Bretonia. The brilliance of the Caliban guides us forward. The earth is our shield, the sky is our armor, and the wind, rain, and thunder are our weapons. Knights, cross the abyss, and ahead is the endless smooth road. In Dragon City, Aya's cry continued to reverberate. As time went by, in the silence, it gradually turned into a low buzzing sound, stirring people's hearts. Even if the story has passed for 150 years, and today's Dragon City guards were not the faithful knights under the Night King, similar feelings continue to surge from the bottom of people's hearts. As the people of Bretonia, there would always be similar elements flowing in their blood. That was the thirst for glory. Once upon a time, the development of holy light religion in Bretonia was in full swing. A large number of foreign priests and holy knights poured in to abuse their power, yet they still received the forbearance of the people of Bretonia. After the Night King left, the people subconsciously wanted to find something to fill the void. However, it was not until this time that people found out that although holy light religion was more powerful, larger in scale, and also had its own light, but compared to the shining light of the Night King, it was nothing. The spirit of disregarding everything for the code in their heart was the glory that they truly yearned for. For this, they did not hesitate to die. Of course, 150 years later, even if people were not familiar with the history, they knew that the result of that battle was the victory of the Night King. The heroic sacrifice of the knights was not in vain, in exchange for an unprecedented high degree of unity in Bretonia. However, people were still impatient to hear Aya's story. In that battle, my father took the lead. The Caliban crushed the 8 great witch doctors of the savage tribe and beheaded the savage lord. The morale of the Knights of the Round Table was like a rainbow as they broke through the enemy's formation with irresistible force. The battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The knights burned their life and soul to persist until the last moment, killing the enemy that was 10 times their number. 3 days later, the whole army cheered heartily to celebrate the victory. Under the high platform, there were countless pairs of shining eyes. Standing on the high platform, Aya has clearly felt that the city seemed to be ignited with a raging flame. Therefore, she held up the Caliban, and a golden beam of light soared into the sky, illuminating the dragon city as if it was daytime. 150 years ago, my father used the Caliban to cut through the endless darkness and despair, establishing an unprecedented feat in Bretonia. Today, the Caliban is still guiding us on the road to victory. At this moment, I can clearly hear the cry of the Caliban. Victory is in front, and will always be in front. The darkness around us is not our destination, the last bit of afterglow in the city is not our destination. Our destination is only to go all the way forward, cutting our way through the thistles and thorns, cutting our way to the light. Some people ask, what is in front? What are we going to fight for? The warriors of 150 years ago, even in the deepest and most desperate situation, still have a clear and firm belief. They believe in the spirit of chivalry, believe that Bretonia will definitely move toward unification and prosperity. And now, in the face of the fragmented country, in the face of the aggressive invasion of holy light religion, I want to say, this is the abyss that we have to cross, this is the powerful enemy that we are about to face. I am the daughter of the Night King, and my heart adheres to the same belief as the previous Night King. I firmly believe that this land is the land of Bretonia, the land of chivalry. Aya's voice was like a gale, like a tsunami. Her impassioned emotion swept through everyone's heart. In the name of the Caliban, I declare that the war for the restoration of Bretonia begins here. Anything that stands in the way of this road will be crushed. We will step on the ladder of victory to reach the shore of eternal glory. Long live Bretonia! Long live Bretonia! Chapter 322. Defeated? In the holy city, a golden red-robed holy one listened to the news reported by his subordinate in disbelief. Faceless One was defeated? The saint angrily slammed the armrest of the saint white stone throne, and a shockwave quickly spread out, causing the entire palace to tremble. In the face of the wrath of a legendary-level Holy One, his subordinate was drenched in cold sweat, but he insisted on reporting the complete news. Yes, everyone present saw that Faceless One was assassinated by a mysterious girl. The weapon she used is suspected to be Bretonia's divine weapon Sword in the Stone. Sword in the Stone? The Holy One was stunned, and then somewhat bewildered. How could it be Sword in the Stone? That's clearly. Forget it, you go and report the news to the Prophet Holy One. Be sure to ask for his opinion. No need, I already know. While speaking, another golden red-robed Holy One walked into the hall. As his footsteps fell, the tremor of the hall also stabilized. Don't panic, the failure of Faceless One is not a bad thing for us. This new saint had the prophecy technique, which was envied by everyone in the church. He could see into the future, and his position was the most respected among the 5 legendary saints. Seeing him coming, the master of the hall hurriedly got up and saluted. What advice does the prophet have? The prophet Holy One said, the failure of Faceless One lies in the variable. When I sent him, I thought that the only opponent would be Bedivere. Even if Rowan and Marina rebelled, he could still suppress them. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden change in Dragon City. Whether it was the girl with the sword in the stone or the 9 regions people around her, they were all variables that I didn't foresee. However, the appearance of this variable made my dream even clearer, and I was finally able to confirm the identity of that black dragon. The black dragon in the Prophet Holy One's dream was the nightmare that had been hovering over Holy Light religion for hundreds of years. At this time, the Prophet Holy One said that the identity of the black dragon had been determined, which immediately made people ecstatic. It's already determined? Then. It's the girl who assassinated Faceless One, the one who claimed to be the daughter of the Night King. It's her? Humph, that's just the right time to catch all of them in one fell swoop. This matter is of great importance, so why don't you and I take action personally? We can't give them any breathing room. The prophet said, that's exactly why I'm here. Apart from you and me, there's also. Before he could finish speaking, a servant suddenly ran in from outside the hall. He looked panicked and lost his composure. The hall master said angrily, "What is this?" The servant fell to his knees. "My apologies, Lord Saint. But I just received urgent news that the Eastern Front is in a state of emergency. A group of people from the knowledge capital of the 9 Regions Alliance, Agma, and the Eastern City-States have come to the Holy City." What? For Holy Light religion, the Eastern City-States Alliance has always been a thorn in their side. With the frequent exchange between the Eastern and Western continents, the development of the Eastern continent has become more and more rapid. Because of this, not long ago, they had deliberately used spies to create conflict between the 2 sides. Unexpectedly, the result was that the 2 sides had become united against a common enemy. The Prophet Saint was also greatly shocked. Among the 5 legendary saints, he firmly supported provoking the relationship between the 9 states and the Eastern City-States, because in the prophecy, there was no possibility of an alliance between the 2. It was even more impossible for them to ally with the City of Knowledge, Agma, to attack the Holy City. Prophet. The hall master was stunned. The prophet closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. The Holy City is the foundation of the Church. The dragon of annihilation is still not strong enough. Let's put it aside for now and solve the immediate crisis. However, we can't completely let it go. I think we can call back the Holy Knights who guard the western checkpoint. Then we can mobilize the local forces in Bretonia to attack. With the remaining strength of Dragon City after the war, there is no possibility of escape. At that time, even if we can't destroy the Night King and the Sword in the Stone, we can destroy their foundation and make them become stray dogs, so that they will no longer be a threat in the future. However, if the Sword in the Stone is the real deal, humph, the mistake of the Savage Lord 150 years ago? At that time, the Savage Lord was defeated and died with 10 times the number of troops, becoming a stepping stone for the Night King to reach the peak. We can send out 20 times the number of troops. Now, there are only 2,000 or 3,000 usable soldiers in Dragon City. If we transfer some of the knights from the western region, plus the surrounding forces, with a core of 100,000 professionals, it will be enough to crush Dragon City. No matter how sharp the Sword in the Stone is, can it kill all 100,000 people? Okay, I understand. In the western part of the continent, at the entrance to the Savage Land stood a heavily fortified fortress. The illustrious Bloodlust Holy Knights were stationed here. This huge legion of more than 30,000 professionals isolated all the creatures in the Savage Land from the continent. It could be said that they were the guardian of the western part of the continent. It was also because of this merit that Holy Light religion was able to firmly stabilize its position as the #1 religion in the continent. Because the duty of guarding the border was too important, the Bloodlust Holy Knights were almost never mobilized. The Holy Knights have been here for generations, so they have been deeply rooted. With the Cold Wind Fortress as the core, they even gradually spread out into a small city. Many of the villagers who once lived nearby chose to rely on the protection of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. In exchange, they would also supplement the Bloodlust Holy Knights with daily necessities. At the same time, there were also some naturalized barbarian tribes who settled here, which the Bloodlust Holy Knights did not stop. In recent decades, the Bloodlust Holy Knights did not have many combat missions, and the life in the small cities around the fortress seemed comfortable. The training and actual combat of the core members of the Bloodlust Holy Knights were concentrated in the west of the fortress and the border, which ordinary people could not see. They only felt that the decades of overall peace seemed eternal. However, on this morning, the sleeping people suddenly woke up. They felt that the earth was gently shaking and the sound of metal collision was continuous. Occasionally, it was mixed with a thick roar of command. The peaceful small city was shrouded in a layer of chilling haze. No one who lived here was completely unfamiliar with the war. The familiar atmosphere suddenly woke them up. Is the war coming? In the middle of the small city was a spacious road, which was the road that the army of the Cold Wind Fortress used to travel inland. Although for decades, the Bloodlust Holy Knights rarely used that road, usually no one dared to occupy that road, so they kept it unobstructed. However, at this time, people were surprised to see that the spacious road has been filled with dense crowds. The heavily armed Bloodlust Holy Knights neatly came out of the fortress and headed toward the eastern direction. At a glance, there were no less than 1,000 people. The follow-up troops were endless. For decades, it was not uncommon for Holy Light religion to mobilize the Bloodlust Holy Knights on a small scale. However, they only mobilized dozens or hundreds of people at a time. This kind of large-scale movement of thousands of people had never happened before. What exactly happened in the eastern region? General, in one night, we mobilized 20,000 troops and more than 5,000 professions. Isn't this action too hasty? In the middle of the army, two knights with particularly bright armor whispered to each other. One of them was the commander of this expeditionary force, one of the deputy heads of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. The other one was the deputy commander of this expedition. The Holy City has issued an urgent summon, requiring the knights to rush to Bretonia within 5 days at all costs and join forces with the local forces to besiege Dragon City. Therefore, even if it's hasty, there's nothing we can do. Local forces? A bunch of motley crew. It's already fortunate that they don't drag us down. I'm afraid we still have to make our move. Dragon City is a formidable enemy. Don't worry too much. Previously, Dragon City has experienced a holy war. More than half of the casualties are left, leaving only a group of defeated soldiers. Moreover, although those motley crew can't be controlled, they still have the numerical advantage. According to the information sent by the church can now mobilize nearly 100,000 professions. Although most of them are only low-level professions, when used correctly, they are still a force that can't be taken lightly. Unfortunately, the production of radiant archons can't keep up. Otherwise, if we use thousands of archons to control them and have them charge fearlessly, we won't even need to do anything. Don't think too much. When the time comes, we might have to rush to the forefront. However, if we're only facing a weary army, one attack should be able to destroy their front line. At that time, let those motley crew follow behind and wipe out the enemy. One battle can end the overall situation. However, 150 years ago, the Night King charged alone and beheaded the 8 great witch doctors and the savage overlord, leaving the enemy army without a leader. We must not repeat the same mistake. Rest assured, no one will be stupid enough to face the enemy head-on. The two commanders and deputy commanders talked while walking. During the march, they gradually outlined the next tactical framework. For the next war, they were full of confidence. Compared to the so-called Dragon City guards who had been castrated by Holy Light religion for 100 years in Bretonia, These warriors in the western border who had been honed in countless actual combat could probably fight against 10 enemies. 5 days later, the bloodlust holy knights crossed thousands of mountains and rivers at an incredible speed and appeared on the land of Bretonia. During the march, the holy knights could clearly feel the unusually oppressive atmosphere in the land of Bretonia, as if a storm was coming. The deputy commander of the holy knights pinched his nose and impatiently said, "There's a unique stench of lizards." Humph, sure enough, in the face of disaster, the reaction of insects is the most sensitive. After this war, Bretonia must undergo a great purification, and I don't know how many people will die. The commander said, "It doesn't matter how many of these shallow heretics die. Holy light religion has been here for more than 100 years, yet they haven't developed many devout believers, yet they still have to transfer people from other places to colonize. What a joke. I think this whole land has been polluted by heretical beliefs. Instead of developing believers here, it's better to turn it into a barren land, just like the wilderness." Unfortunately, Bretonia is located in the hinterland of the continent, so large-scale purification is not realistic. However, as long as the last resistance force is eliminated, although this land is vast, it would still be at the mercy of others. The commander nodded. "That's right, the purpose of our trip is also this. Look, not far ahead is Dragon City. But, why are there so many people outside the city?" The deputy commander of the Holy Knights, the deputy commander of the expeditionary force, was an advanced high-order profession with amazing eyesight. He could see the situation outside Dragon City from far away. This city that had just ended the Holy War was now tightly surrounded by hundreds of thousands of troops. Those troops came from hundreds of forces around Dragon City, each with different flags. Although the two sides did not fight each other, the atmosphere of the confrontation between the two armies was so oppressive that people could not breathe. The strength of the deputy commander was not much different, so he quickly saw the situation and could not help but laugh. These dogs are really diligent. In just 5 days, there are already so many people who responded to the call of Holy City to participate in the battle to destroy Dragon City. It seems like after 100 years, the influence of the Night King has completely disappeared. Humph, of course it's impossible. If it weren't for the Night King haunting us, how could the faith of our holy light religion not be spread? It's just that, anyone with a brain should know what would happen if they follow an inexplicable little girl and become the enemy of holy light religion. As for survival, it's a biological instinct. The deputy commander said with a smile, "General is right. These hundreds of thousands of troops that gathered were not elite troops full of fighting spirit. They were just a group of jackals and wild dogs. These hundreds of thousands of people besieged the city but did not dare to launch an attack. They had to wait for the arrival of the bloodlust holy knights." In the eyes of the holy knight commander, such a motley army was like mud under the soles of his shoes. However, even though he despised them in his heart, after the war, these hundreds of thousands of people were still an indispensable help. In particular, among them, there were more than 100,000 people with professions. Although most of them were barely stuck on the edge of professions, with such a large number, if used properly, they could play a miraculous effect. According to the news from Holy City, among these hundreds of thousands of people, there were 3 leading forces. They were the 3 largest cities around Dragon City, and also the 3 cities where holy light religion has the strongest penetration. Now that they have received the edict from holy light religion, the 3 city masters personally led the army to fight. Similarly, according to the news from Holy City, as long as the holy knights pacified and controlled these 3 forces, the remaining hundreds of thousands of people would naturally respond to the call. When the bloodlust holy knights approached Dragon City, there were indeed 3 teams from the army outside the city, which went to meet the holy knights. The number of people in the team was not large, but their momentum was obviously better than the surrounding motley army. Obviously, they were the personal guards of the city master. The commander and deputy commander of the holy knights looked at each other and helplessly smiled. Even if they looked down on them in their hearts, now that they wanted to borrow their strength, they had to give them face. Since the 3 city masters took the initiative to greet them, then the commander and deputy commander of the Holy Knights naturally had to come forward. For the sake of caution, the two of them took the most elite 50 people of the Holy Knights to leave the main force and stood on an open hilltop. The team of the 3 city masters took a detour and soon went up the hill. On the hilltop, the 2 commanders stood side by side on the left and right side. Their expressions were cold and solemn, which made them seem unusually difficult to get close to. As for the 3 city lords who came later, they all put on disgusting smiles. One of the city masters, whose status was obviously slightly higher than the other 2, was the first to open his mouth and say with a smile, "2 generals, we have been waiting for a long time." The city master was tall and sturdy, with a thick beard on his face and a mighty appearance. It was just that, the rigid smile on his face, which was obviously deliberately put on, made him look funny. To be able to see the 2 generals with my own eyes is really a blessing of 3 lifetimes. With that, he came forward and stretched out his arm, as if he wanted to shake hands with the Holy Knights. However, the commander of the Holy Knights was already extremely disgusted with these jackals and wild dogs. How could he be willing to shake hands with him? He laughed coldly, as if he did not see the flattering gesture of the other party. Against wild dogs, why was there a need to give so much face? Being willing to come out alone to meet him was already a gift from the Holy Light. For creatures like these who had been contaminated by the mixed blood, just surviving was an original sin. However, in the next moment, the rigid and dull smiling face suddenly flashed with a sharp gaze. And in his outstretched right hand, there was even a sharp weapon that slowly turned transparent and revealed its shape. In the next moment, a golden light flashed before his eyes, and then the whole world fell into darkness. At the same time, the Holy Knights present were horrified to see their commander's head fly high up into the air, their eyes still filled with disbelief. Chapter 323. The Bloodlust Holy Knights were the most powerful force in Holy Light religion. They had been guarding the savage frontier all year round, fighting against the wild beasts and barbarians in the wilderness all day long, honing their rich combat experience and ice-cold mind. For the Bloodlust Holy Knights, the battlefield was like an amusement park. Immersed in it, there would be no fear, no hesitation, only the desire for victory at all costs. This was an incredibly powerful fighting will army. They could be besieged by several times the number of enemies and fight to the last soldier. They could endure under extremely harsh conditions until the opportunity to fight came. They could withstand any difficult test. However, at this moment, the Bloodlust Holy Knights fell into infinite shock and panic. Because right in front of them, the head of the commander of the expeditionary force flew high into the air. His eyes were wide open, and he died with everlasting regret. Everything seemed so incredible. He was the deputy leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights, a high-order profession. He once single-handedly destroyed a powerful tribe in the wilderness and tore tens of thousands of powerful barbarian warriors into minced meat. He also once beheaded a mountain-sized beast in the wilderness. He had a body of steel, so even a strand of his hair was indestructible. Because of this, he could stand out from the thousands of people and win the throne of the deputy leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. He was appointed as the commander of the expeditionary force, responsible for the crusade to decide the fate of Bretonia. However, just a moment ago, he was still proudly waiting for the wild dogs to lick his boots. The next moment, his head was separated from his body, and he died with everlasting regret. The one who beheaded him was the leader of the 3 city lords who came to surrender. A moment ago, that city lord had a smile on his face, bent down and reached out his hand. The next moment, a heavy sword appeared in his hand. His hand moved like lightning, and he beheaded the head. It was so fast that no one could react. The head flew up, and the beheader's figure began to twist and change. The tall and sturdy warrior rapidly shrank, and the rock-like figure gradually turned into a gentle and charming woman. His thick beard and hair turned into soft and shiny golden hair, his pair of dark green eyes were without joy or sorrow, and the heavy sword in his hand flashed with dazzling light. No Bretonia person would mistake that heavy sword, and anyone who had prepared for the Bretonia campaign in advance would not mistake that cold face. The sword in the stone and its master, the new generation Night King Aya. Just as Aya resolutely beheaded the head, the two city lords next to her also made their move. One of them lifted the heavy cloak and hood with one hand, revealing a steel-like determined face. The other hand, like a spear, pierced the deputy commander's heart, and then the arm ignited with an inextinguishable flame, burning the corpse. The other city lord also changed his figure, from a tall and sturdy man, into a graceful girl. 12 rainbow lights flew out from the girl's sleeves and danced in the air, leaving trails of different colors. As they spun, they combined into gorgeous rainbow petals. In the blink of an eye, the elite holy knights on the hilltop were all killed by this deadly rainbow flower. These two people were the elite holy knights on peak. And these two were naturally beasts. The two were Saint Sword. Together with Aya, they pretended to be city lords who surrendered to the holy knights and lured out the commander and deputy commander of the holy knights. Then, with their full strength, they caught all the high-level people in one fell swoop. Together with Aya, they pretended to be the defecting city lord and lured the deputy commander of the Holy Knight Regiment out. Then, with their full strength, in the twinkling of an eye, these high-level holy knights were wiped out. Knights, charge with me. Outside Dragon City, hundreds of thousands of soldiers shouted in unison. Their voices shook the sky. Hundreds of thousands of people, like a tsunami, followed Aya's sword in the stone. In the face of the surging army, especially the Night King who took the lead with her shining sword in the stone, the bloodthirsty holy knights were like a group of dragons without a leader. Their hearts were at a loss. When their eyes came into contact with the light of the sword in the stone, the knights in the front subconsciously retreated. This was perhaps the first time in a long time that the bloodthirsty holy knights were so strongly shaken. What exactly happened? How could the situation suddenly become like this? Without much time to think, the knights in the front row have officially confronted the enemy. In front of them, they held up their thick shields. The mysterious holy runes on the shields were as smooth as a mirror, and each shield was enough to withstand the impact of a furious giant elephant. And the rows of shields were connected, like a moving wall, indestructible. Even though they were like a group of dragons without a leader, the holy knights still played their due strength. Unfortunately, in front of the endless waves, a brief flash was meaningless. Not to mention that in front of the waves, there was an invincible sword. Ha! Along with a thunderous roar, Aya swung the sword in the stone with all her strength. The sword light pointed, and a crack that was more than 10 meters wide and dozens of miles long burst open. Like the bloody mouth of a giant beast, it instantly swallowed hundreds of bloodthirsty holy knights. The defensive formation that the holy knights hastily laid out was also gone. Knights, charge! The waves came, and the last reef was submerged in the darkness. Why did the rabble that gathered like wild dogs suddenly change sides and cooperate with Dragon City to fight against Holy Light religion? This matter could be traced back to 5 days ago. Dragon City had just ended the cruel holy war, and the Night King made her first public speech, which was inspiring. That night, under the dim light of the night, the noise of Dragon City shook the sky. Outside the city, countless pairs of bewildered eyes stared at the slightly trembling city. The vigorous eruption of energy in the city was like a substance, making it difficult for people to look straight at it. At this time, even though everyone knew that the guards in Dragon City were just a tired army, unable to fight again, but no one dared to face the soaring momentum. Aya's speech in the city spread far outside the city. Everyone knew that 150 years ago, there was a monstrous and powerful savage overlord who tried to go head-to-head with the Night King. As a result, he became a stepping stone for the Night King to unify the country. Compared to the desolate wild lord, what were they? They could barely be regarded as the savage lord's pawn. It was not easy to take advantage of the Night King's descendant. At this time, provoking the opponent was simply courting death. However, could they just sit back and relax? The daughter of the Night King wanted to restore Bretonia and unify the whole country. As an independent force, they would inevitably be involved in this storm. However, in most people's hearts, they didn't have much rejection for this. Because compared to a fragmented and chaotic world, what was wrong with a unified country? At least, if the Night King was still in power, how could he allow Holy Light religion to abuse their power and exploit the people? Among the people present, there was no one who had not been oppressed by Holy Light religion. This organization, which loved to expand, implemented a colonial policy toward Bretonia. They transferred the resources of other cities to Bretonia, established their forces in the major cities, and then used various means to exclude the local rulers. Even Dragon City, an old and powerful city with the Knight of the Round Table, Bedivere, was suppressed by Holy Light religion to the point that it was difficult to breathe, not to mention the situation in other places. Unfortunately, since the disappearance of the Night King, no one has been able to lead the people to effectively resist Holy Light religion. The few who resisted were also annihilated at the first moment. Thus, people could only helplessly watch the country being torn apart and the people being oppressed by the Holy Light religion. Until this time, a ray of light appeared in front of people. Viscount Riddell, what do you think we should do next? Outside Dragon City, the chief magician of Blue Tile City asked. The great knight beside him helplessly shook his head. You ask me, but who should I ask? How could I, the son of the city lord, have the final say in such a big matter? The magician refused to let it go and asked, what do you think? The great knight was silent for a moment. Seeing that there was no one around, he felt a bit more at ease. Although the reputation of the magician in front of him was not very good, after getting along with him for half a day, he felt that the reputation might not necessarily be believed. Not to mention that Riddell City and Blue Tile City were far apart, and there was no conflict of interest between them, so there was no harm in speaking frankly. Personally speaking, I am a knight, and I believe in the knight's code. And the Night King, even though he has passed away, is still the lord that I serve in my heart. Can you understand that? The magician sighed. Don't forget, I used to be a knight, so why can't I understand your idea? In this land, it's not easy to find a knight who doesn't believe in the Night King. So when I saw the sword in the stone reappear in the world and heard that lady's speech, I actually wanted to immediately fly there and follow her. Unfortunately, I can't do as I please. The magician said with a smile, you're the son of the city master, so of course, you have more concerns than others. If it were me, I would have already run to pledge my allegiance. Unfortunately, I've become a magician, and my reputation is not good, so I probably won't be welcomed by the new Night King. Ha ha ha. The great knight naturally wouldn't take the magician's words seriously, but he still said, this new Night King's appearance is too sudden. In addition to her questionable identity, she, after all, lacks a foundation in Bretonia. She wants to restore her country and expel Holy Light religion, so she must borrow all the power that she can borrow. A high-order profession like you would certainly be a guest of honor. The magician said, for an individual, it's not difficult to be a guest of honor, but what about a force? The great knight's annoyance was pointed out, so he coldly humphed. However, at this time, a hearty voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. Don't worry, we also have a special discount for group customers. Who is it? Who? The great knight and the magician were startled. They had been watching the development of the battle outside Dragon City for a whole day. During this period, they deliberately chose a secluded corner to stay, so as to avoid being disturbed. Unexpectedly, they were unknowingly approached by a stranger from behind. The two of them turned around at the same time and activated all kinds of protective means. However, when they turned around, they saw a gentle smiling face without any hostility. Do you two know something about Dragon City? Chapter 324. Many things, after the truth was revealed, were actually very simple. The reason why Holy Light religion was attacked was because someone was one step ahead of them, who instigated all of Holy Light religion's lackeys to rebel. This was something that no one could have predicted. In the strategic layout of Holy Light religion, these miscellaneous troops, which they regarded as ants, actually played an important role, to share the damage and reduce the loss for the Bloodlust Holy Knights. The Bloodlust Holy Knights were the foundation of Holy Light religion, so the loss of one of them was heartache. In order to let the miscellaneous troops of Bretonnia keep up with the action and act as cannon fodder, Holy Light religion's action was quite fast. Early the next morning, they contacted the leaders of the several core forces and used various means to tie them to the church's chariot. Then they gradually spread to the periphery, and in just 3 days, they contacted and gathered hundreds of thousands of troops. This high efficiency was rare even within the church. However, someone's action was much faster than the church's elites. That night, he began to act. In his words, "In this turbulent time, we should dig people as early as possible." In fact, everyone understood this truth. The decision of the future of Bretonnia was largely those miscellaneous forces that occupied various regions. To win their support, one could even think with one's knee. However, no matter how fast the church's action was, it was, after all, an organizational action. The specific implementation had to go through a series of procedures. However, as long as Wang Lu thought about it, who could restrain him? The degree of freedom of action was completely not on the same level. Of course, just seizing the initiative was not enough. Compared to the number one church in the continent, Aya and Dragon City, no matter how one looked at it, were somewhat unstable and not worth relying on. Empty words, why should people accompany you to take the risk? For this problem, even Aya didn't have a mature plan. What she could do was to show her enthusiasm, hoping to arouse the resonance in the blood of the people of Bretonnia. To a certain extent, she did a good job. After listening to Aya's speech, almost everyone's heart palpitated for a moment. However, this was, of course, not enough. To be the leader of a force, they couldn't be emotional. They were best at balancing the advantages and disadvantages of the situation. However, for Wang Lu, the solution to this problem was too simple. Isn't the key to poaching people from the opponent the premium? No one would not be tempted by the offer from Holy Light religion. Take Wang Lu's first poaching as an example. After Wang Lu's frank appearance, it immediately aroused the other party's vigilance, because his smiling face was not unfamiliar to anyone. In the fight during the day, Wang Lu single-handedly blocked Faceless One and successfully forced him to retreat, showing his unfathomable strength. Most importantly, after Faceless One was killed, Wang Lu soared into the sky, and under the watchful eyes of millions of people, he reached out and hugged Aya, showing an extremely intimate relationship. "Don't be nervous, I have no ill intentions towards you too." Wang Lu shrugged and said, "In fact, I'm here as a lobbyist." Lobbyist? To persuade you to join the new Night King. Just now, Her Majesty Night King spoke so loudly that you must have heard it. She wants to rebuild the country and restore the unity. However, right now, there are still many things to be done, and the opponent is a behemoth like Holy Light religion. Therefore, we urgently need all forces to join us. For this reason, we have offered very favorable conditions. It can be said that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hearing Wang Lu's straightforward statement, the Great Knight and the magician looked at each other. They didn't hurry to inquire about the other party's conditions, but instead asked, "Who are you exactly? The identity is uncertain, what's the use of your extravagant bragging?" Wang Lu said, "Me. You can think of me as the Night King's agent. Unless she explicitly objects, my words have the same effect as hers." Same effect? The two were surprised. What exactly is this guy's background? With the Night King's pride, how could she easily let others speak for her? Wang Lu smiled and said, "Because we're a family, why should there be a difference?" A family? The Great Knight and the magician's eyes widened. Just now, the majestic new Night King actually. However, considering what they saw with their own eyes, the intimacy between Wang Lu and Aya, these words did have some weight. Seeing that they were somewhat in disbelief, Wang Lu took out a few crystal-clear chips. 9 region specialty, crystal recording, can record images. The key point is that the recorded content can't be fabricated or tampered with. You guys are knowledgeable, so you should know about this. Both of them nodded. Then Wang Lu extracted the image from the chip. Suddenly, the two of them were shocked and staggered back. In the chip, Aya was wearing a plain dress and cooking hard in front of a stove. Also, she was lying on the dining table, taking a nap, looking at ease, seemingly defenseless against her surroundings. The last one, which was also the most powerful one, was Aya carefully feeding chicken soup to Wang Lu with a spoon, looking very affectionate. Naturally, they couldn't guess that these were the props that Wang Lu deliberately took on the Spirit Sword Mountain in case he needed them in the future. The last one was actually Wang Lu cooperating with Aya to develop a new dish. However, for those who didn't know the inside story, the deterrent was unparalleled. Seeing the two stunned, Wang Lu smiled and said, "The life of the new Night King, is that enough to explain the problem? Very well, let's believe your identity. So, what does the Night King want us to do?" The Great Knight asked seriously, "Pledge allegiance and surrender?" Pledge allegiance and surrender? The Night King has never pursued those things. Don't forget, the Knights of the Round Table, which symbolizes equality and freedom, is the invention of the Night King. Wang Lu shook his head. What the Night King wants is a unified and powerful Bretonia, not a high and mighty throne that suppresses the entire land. What she needs is an alliance of all forces to join, to get along with each other equally and to fight against the foreign enemy. An alliance of equals, where there is no distinction between superior and inferior? Wang Lu said, "It's similar to the eastern city-states. The alliance forces form a council to command the overall situation. The forces send representatives as members to discuss and decide major strategic decisions. Each city has a high degree of autonomy. There is no absolute ruler in the alliance, and the interests of all parties will be fully respected. For you, this should be an extremely generous condition, right?" "Of course." The magician's voice trembled slightly. "But, why? Why ask when you already know the answer?" "Of course, it's because your value is now at its highest." Wang Lu was very calm. "Whether it's the Night King or the Holy Light religion, they all need to win your support. For this reason, the Night King is willing to show her generosity. Of course, don't think that we lack confidence. Don't forget, the Night King has the sword in the stone, the proof of the King of Bretonia, and also the invincible blessed weapon. More than 100 years ago, the Night King, with the sword in the stone, created a miracle. I don't think I need to repeat it. Compared to the difficulties that the previous king once encountered, the current situation is actually nothing." That's true." Seeing that the two of them were somewhat moved, Wang Lu immediately said, "By the way, the Night King has reached an agreement with the 9 regions Wanxian League. You should know about what happened in the East recently." 9 regions Wanxian League? That's not surprising. The exchanges between the East and the West continent are getting more and more frequent, so the Wanxian League also needs to win allies in this continent. In fact, as the representative of the Wanxian League, I was sent to the Night King to help her rebuild her motherland. So that's how it is. In addition, we have the support of the Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Wild Goose Falling City, Silverstone Fortress, and other forces. Coupled with the available soldiers of Dragon City Guards, our forces have begun to take shape. Is that true? The Great Knight's eyes shone and his voice trembled. It was not until this time that he really felt shocked. The Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Wild Goose Falling City, and Silverstone Fortress were all first-class forces in Bretonia. But now, they have actually joined the Dragon City Alliance? If you don't believe me, you can ask them. In short, it's the same sentence, this opportunity doesn't come again. After a moment of silence, the Great Knight's eyes lit up and he said in a sinking voice, "If Her Majesty the Night King really thinks so, then I can promise on behalf of Riddle City that we are willing to join the alliance. I hope we can work together to build a beautiful and powerful country." After a long time, the magician also nodded. "Then, I will also overstep a bit and make a promise on behalf of Blue Tile City. After seeing your sincerity, we will not let Her Majesty the Night King down. Wang Lu said with a smile, very well, the specific matter, please immediately report back to the city master. By the way, Holy Light Religion still doesn't know that we have developed an alliance, so when the time comes, I hope that you will cooperate with us. A moment later, in another camp on the outskirts of Dragon City, the tent of the Meteorite Mercenary Corps' leader welcomed an uninvited guest. Sir Leader, do you want to know about Dragon City? Yes, Riddle City and Blue Tile City have joined the alliance. Now, we are waiting for you. At present, Holy Light Religion still doesn't know about this, so later, we will need your cooperation. A moment later, the leader of the Silverstone Fortress, General Vaca, also heard similar words. Sir General, do you want to know about Dragon City? Yes, the Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Riddle City, and Blue Tile City have joined the alliance. Now, we are waiting for you. Yes, we will need your cooperation. Holy Light Religion still doesn't know about our conversation. On the same night, similar scenes happened many times. Wang Lu spared no effort and talked all night with more than 50 forces outside the city. With generous conditions, he won over a large number of independent forces to join the alliance. 5 days later, the Bloodlust Holy Knight Regiment smugly appeared outside Dragon City. They didn't know that the wild dogs that surrendered have become hungry wolves with hidden claws. And they themselves would be buried in the wolf's belly. Chapter 325. It's really not a happy celebration banquet. In the Dragon City Master's mansion, Aya picked up a glass of wine, but she didn't have the slightest interest in drinking. In front of the wine table, there was a burst of laughter. The high-order professions of Dragon City guards, the leaders of the forces around Dragon City and their personal guards, more than 200 people gathered in the lobby of the Dragon City Master's mansion. This mansion belonged to Bedivere, which was located in one of the most prosperous areas of the city. However, Bedivere preferred to live in the barracks, so the Dragon City Master's mansion was rarely used. However, now, in the deserted mansion, people were toasting each other, talking and laughing. This was a celebration banquet to celebrate the glorious victory that had just ended. The invincible Bloodlust Holy Knights of Holy Light Religion suffered a devastating blow at the gate of Dragon City. More than 30,000 people of the Bloodlust Holy Knights were completely wiped out. The commander and deputy commander died on the spot, and none of the high-order professions were spared. Only a few lucky small fries managed to escape, but they were already insignificant. This was perhaps the heaviest loss that the Bloodlust Holy Knights suffered since their establishment. Especially since even the deputy commander died here, it was absolutely a devastating loss. On the other side, after this victory, the reputation of Aya and Dragon City guards was like the sun in the sky. The entire Bretonia trembled. The Caliban in Aya's hand shone with dazzling light, as if the restoration of royal power. At this time, there seemed to be no reason to feel unhappy. However, whenever she saw the various leaders of the various forces in the lobby, Aya felt deeply helpless. This was a glorious victory, but also a victory that was completely out of her control. Although the fierce battle under the city wall had solved the immediate enemy, it had buried a deeper hidden danger. In order to integrate the coalition forces, Wang Lu, in an almost crazy manner, persuaded more than 40 city masters, generals, and regimental commanders to form a giant alliance. However, as the price, on behalf of Aya, he made an incredibly generous promise. A federal country without royal power that was jointly governed by all forces? That morning, when Wang Lu reported the results of his work to Aya with a tired body, the angry Aya subconsciously wanted to chop him with her sword. Since her death from serious injury more than 100 years ago, she did not hesitate to transform into a spirit of the brave departed. With her obsession, she crossed the 9 regions, and after many hardships, returned to her homeland. Wasn't it just to rebuild the country and restore the former glory of Bretonia? But all of this was completely destroyed by Wang Lu overnight. Without the Night King, could Bretonia still be called Bretonia? How could a country without a supreme leader be called a country? What was the difference between a loosely structured federation and a divided regime fighting for itself? Then what was the point of her painstakingly, no, all of them painstakingly doing? In this regard, Wang Lu did not argue too much. Trust me. Trust you? Believe that I won't harm you. Believe that I will always be invincible. But... Aya was about to say something, but Wang Lu gently pressed her lips. Trust me. Aya was silent for a long time. Finally, she did not say another word. Her dark green eyes were gradually filled with determination and trust. Yes, I believe in you. I bet my motherland to believe in you. And the result of that moment of trust was the helplessness at the celebration banquet. The celebratory atmosphere around her could not arouse her sympathy, because Aya knew that after tonight's banquet was over, Dragon City would become the arena of power for the dignitaries in the entire Bretonia. Just imagining that scene was enough to give people a headache. Wang Lu, I can really believe in you, right? Closing her eyes, Aya drank the wine in her cup in one gulp and excluded all the noise around her ears from her mind. Tonight was the night of victory, so for the time being, she did not want to think about so many annoying things. It was just that, why did she always feel that she had forgotten something important? At the same time, in Dragon City, although there were traces of war everywhere, the festive atmosphere was still overflowing. Most of the shops in the commercial street had reopened, heartily welcoming the hundreds of thousands of troops who returned triumphantly. Luli happily and jubilantly walked on the street that had just been cleaned. Her hands were full of barbecue skewers, and the aroma of the meat was overwhelming. Of course, no matter how slender her fingers were, the number of skewers that she could hold was limited. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to use her flying sword magical power to float hundreds of skewers in mid-air like flying swords. When she was happy, she would randomly pick one and take a bite. Dragon City's food and beverage industry in Bretonia could be considered as an anomaly. It brought together gourmets from all over the Western continent, who, with their unique craftsmanship from their hometown, rescued Dragon City from the despair of food. Of course, the price had always been high. However, today was the night of victory, and Luli, as a great contributor to the victory, almost everywhere she went was free. Not to mention that Wang Lu had deliberately stuffed her full of money and told her that she must eat until she was satisfied. Luli felt that her several months of hard work in the Western continent had, at this moment, gotten the biggest reward. However, after eating barbecue for a long time, her mouth was somewhat greasy. Therefore, Luli wanted to fly to the air to find a cold drink shop. The cold drink is on the left corner of the alley. A gentle voice came into her ear. Luli looked over and sure enough, she saw a clear cold drink in an inconspicuous small shop. Thank you. Luli swallowed a large piece of fat and was ready to buy the cold drink. However, when she turned around, she found out that the person who kindly reminded her was holding a cup of emerald-colored drink and handing it to her. That person seemed to be about 35 or 36 years old, dressed in a magician's robe, looking elegant and friendly. It's my treat. Luli firmly shook her head. Senior brother said, I can't eat food from strangers. The magician said with a smile, if you buy food from the shop, do you know the shop owner? Luli was immediately stunned. Yes. Then she reluctantly let go of her hand and let the skewers float around her. However, she didn't dare to take another bite. You don't have to be so dogmatic. Moreover, we've actually met before. The magician laughed in spite of himself and then said, in the previous battle, you saved my life. At that time, in the melee, I was approached by a dark holy knight. Seeing that I was at my wit's end, you used a flying sword to kill him, and I was thus saved. Therefore, just now, I wanted to thank you for your life-saving grace. However, you probably don't remember a small fry like me, right? Who knew that? Luli seriously said, I remember, at that time, you were casting the thundercloud spell. The magician was pleasantly surprised. You actually remember. Hee hee, my memory has always been very good. Luli was very happy. In that case, we're not strangers anymore, the magician said, and then handed the drink in his hand forward. It's my treat. Luli thought for a moment. Indeed, if we're not strangers, then there should be no problem. Then she took the drink and drank half of it in one gulp. By the way, what's your name? I'm just a nobody, the magician said, looked around, and then changed the topic. Is your senior brother not here? Luli didn't care whether the other party introduced himself or not. She just said, senior brother is busy with important things in the city master's mansion. The magician shook his head. Celebration night, what could be more important than accompanying the hero? You're one of the biggest contributors to the victory of the war, how could he leave you alone? Luli somewhat didn't understand. I don't know. Senior brother always has his reasons for doing things. Alas, your senior brother doesn't care about you at all. Of course not, senior brother has always been very good to me. Luli sweetly smiled. Accompany me to practice swordsmanship, cook for me, feed me snacks, and almost never scold me loudly. Is that so? The magician was a bit surprised. He looked at Luli seriously and said, do you like your senior brother? Luli frankly replied, very much. Ha ha ha, few people in 9 regions are as straightforward as you. But, since you like him, why don't you strive for him? Luli curiously asked, strive for what? If you like a person, you should strive for the other party's love. Luli explained, but senior brother already likes me very much. Although he didn't say it, I can feel it. The magician said, if he likes you, how could he let you stay here alone while he accompanied the Night King to drink and have fun? Obviously, he likes the Night King more than you. Luli gawked for a moment. Yes. Aren't you going to do something? Do something? Luli was puzzled. Why? Because only if you do more and better, senior brother will like you more and dote on you more. Don't you want that? Luli somewhat hesitated. But, I don't know how to do it. Previously, senior brother always told me to do it. That's why senior brother doesn't like you the most. You have to learn to take the initiative. The magician earnestly said, if you wait for senior brother to tell you to do everything, his liking for you will be limited. Luli somewhat helplessly said, but I don't know what to do. With the degree of intimacy between the two of you, a small fight won't have any effect. If you want to do it, you have to do it big. The magician said, since ancient times, nothing can move people's hearts and make them remember for a lifetime than the word sacrifice. Sacrifice? Luli tilted her head and listened carefully. For example, if both of you are poisoned and there is only one antidote, then, Luli said with a smile, of course it's me who will eat it. Senior brother's non-phase method is immune to all poisons, nothing will happen to him. The magician was silent for a long time and then said, then if we encounter a strong enemy, senior brother will carry it in front of us. Wrong. The magician hated iron for not becoming steel. Do you think your senior brother's defense is powerful and omnipotent? In this world, there will always be enemies that he can't beat, there will always be heavy pressure that he can't bear. When the time comes, do you still want him to carry it in front of you? Do you still want to safely hide behind your senior brother and let him bleed and sacrifice for you? Then what should I do? The magician coldly said, when it's necessary, you should be the one to carry it in front of him and sacrifice yourself to fight for the chance to survive for senior brother. Sacrifice myself. Luli was somewhat confused, but also somewhat enlightened. Her expression gradually turned blank. If you really like senior brother, you should have the awareness to sacrifice yourself for him. The magician said, only in that way can you be qualified to be senior brother's favorite woman. Is that so? Luli asked in a perplexed manner, but senior brother rarely let us fall into such a dangerous situation. If there's difficulty, you have to go. If there's no difficulty, then create the difficulty, you have to go. The magician lightly said, there are so many powerful enemies on the continent, do you want your senior brother to provoke them? Since your purpose is to sacrifice yourself, then you should take the initiative to create such an opportunity. Luli was confused. Sorry, I don't quite understand. I'd better ask senior brother. Wait a minute. The magician stopped her. This kind of thing, if you and senior brother discussed it in advance, how could there be a surprise? The reason why he doesn't like you the most is because you rely on him for everything, like a child who can't grow up. Upon hearing this, Luli was a bit sad. Very well, I won't say it. About today's matter, you go back and think about it. But, there's no need to tell your senior brother about the matter of meeting me. Trivial things are not worth mentioning. Your senior brother has a lot of things to do. If you bother him with these things, even if he doesn't say it, his heart will hate you. Luli let out an oh sound, but she has already bowed her head, no longer in the mood to say anything. The magician smiled. Well, today, I can talk so much with my savior, even if I die, I have no regrets. So, goodbye, Luli. With that, he turned around and left, no longer bothering Luli. His figure soon disappeared in the vast sea of people. Completely disappeared, as if he had never existed. Chapter 326. After the end of the banquet that lasted until early in the morning, Aya groggily returned to her bedroom, which was actually the bedroom of the city master's mansion. She had the body of the brave departed, and as one of the most powerful knight profession in the continent, her physique was so powerful that it was even superior to that of the wild beasts. Naturally, her alcohol tolerance was also bottomless. But she was still drunk. At the banquet, Bedivere unexpectedly took out the secret wine of the dragon clan. 1 cup was diluted into 1 barrel, which made all the heroes in the hall fall to the ground. Aya drank the rest of the barrel by herself, and suddenly felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes, she found that the luxurious ceiling of the city master's mansion was no longer in front of her, but in endless deep darkness. Good morning, Aya. Wang Lu's gentle greeting, at this time, sounded faintly dull. Where is this? Aya shook her dizzy head and then struggled to prop herself up, trying to observe the situation around her. However, her hands softened and she almost fell back down. Wang Lu reached out his hand to pull Aya up and then shook his head. Alas, look at you, you're a complete mess. Not only are you delirious, even your hair is messed up. Let me help you pull out this strand of hair. Aya peevishly swatted away Wang Lu's hand, and then her eyes swept around. Her somewhat blurred eyes suddenly turned sharp. Is this the king's treasure house? Wang Lu said, finally, you haven't forgotten. Although we've won against Holy Light Religion, we're not free yet. The main task has not been completed, it's just that our side task is a bit too far. Aya was silent for a moment. What about the others? Are they all here? Of course. The price for the group transmission is very high, how could we not gather all of them? Aya narrowed her eyes and sure enough, in the darkness, she saw the figures of Luli, Bai Shixian, and Quan Zouhua. What the hell is going on? Wang Lu said, 999 blood roses have been collected. After the 2 wars, we've collected more than 1,500 bodies of middle-order professions of Holy Light Religion. Aya said, I know, but I remember Golden King once said that after we return to Taba City, we can only enter the treasure house through any entrance. So, I never thought I would come back here so soon. While speaking, Aya's eyes gradually became sharp. Wang Lu, I'm willing to believe you, but please give me an explanation. Why? It could be said that the timing for Wang Lu to pull Aya back to the treasure house was indeed inappropriate. Because after experiencing the war that determined the future of Bretonia, Aya wanted to take this opportunity to comprehensively strengthen her authority, as much as possible to make up for the side effect of Wang Lu's previous headhunting at a premium price. Although Wang Lu's promise was not Aya's original intention, Aya would not blatantly break the promise. In her opinion, even in a federal country, she could still have authority over anyone, as long as she operated properly during this period of time. Unfortunately, in this best period of time, she was caught by Wang Lu in the treasure house and missed the opportunity. And with Aya's understanding of Wang Lu, it was hard to imagine that he was careless. The reason? Seeing that Aya seriously asked, or rather questioned, Wang Lu could only earnestly reply, I really don't want you to repeat the same mistake, that's all. Repeat the same mistake? Haven't you learned your lesson from the failure of more than 100 years ago? Aya sighed. That's not the same. Yes, at that time, your situation was actually better than now. Holy Light religion didn't regard you as a thorn in their side, and Bretonia wasn't castrated by Holy Light religion for more than 100 years. At that time, your strength was at its peak. But you failed. Your loyal Knights of the Round Table were torn apart, your trusted subjects left you, and the knights who were once like brothers turned their swords against each other, blood flowed like a river. And now, the situation is even more difficult than that time. What's wrong with me worrying that you will repeat the same mistake? Your worry is unnecessary, I will not make the same mistake. Aya said, besides, would taking me away from Dragon City improve the situation? A group of dragons without a leader will only become more chaotic. You don't have to worry about Dragon City. I left behind a sufficient backup plan before I came here. Moreover, for the current situation, if we make progress in the king's treasure house as soon as possible, we can take drastic measures against Holy Light religion, which can better contain them, making them have no time to take care of Bretonia. At least, we have the bargaining chip. Aya calmly thought for a moment and then accepted Wang Lu's explanation. Right now, the king's treasure house was the most important strategic location of Holy Light religion, and its status was much higher than that of Bretonia. Once there was instability here, Holy Light religion would not hesitate to calm the situation, which could indeed play a containment effect. However, she still couldn't let go of the previous question, what did he mean by repeating the same mistake? Wang Lu said, as for your so-called won't make a mistake, you haven't even realized where exactly did you go wrong, so how can you have the confidence to say that you won't make a mistake? Of course I know. Aya's voice gradually rose. For the past 100 years, I have been reflecting on myself all the time. I am very clear that as a king, I still have too many shortcomings. Therefore, this time, I will be more cautious and more humble to lead my people to victory. I will absolutely not fail again. Ridiculous. Wang Lu was unprecedentedly mean. Let me put it this way, based on your current awareness, you will definitely fail again. Because you don't understand what qualities a real leader should have. Do you think that by piling up your personal attributes to infinitely high, you can be a qualified king? That's a joke. Speaking to this, seeing Aya's angry face, Wang Lu explained, apart from the difference in ability, just in terms of personal charisma, between you and me, who do you think is more suitable to be a king? Aya frowned, seemingly finding it difficult to understand. How could you ask such a stupid question? Aya, you feel too good about yourself. In fact, it's your so-called personal charisma that determines that you are doomed to not be a qualified king, because... Shut up, bastard, you're too noisy. Just as Wang Lu was ready to seriously popularize Aya's success theory, Golden King's voice faintly sounded from the vast darkness. Golden King? Aya promptly put down the topic and began to take the master of the treasure house seriously. It's you? Of course it's him. Otherwise, how could we cross thousands of mountains and rivers in one night to come to the treasure house of Taba City? Now that Holy Light religion and the eastern city-states are engaged in a fierce battle, the city has been under high martial law, so normal methods can't get through. However, we have a back door specially opened by the master of the treasure house. Wang Lu promptly explained, 999 human blood roses can perfectly pass the 5th level and get the highest reward of this level. But if you collect more, you can also get another reward. Being able to teleport us from tens of thousands of miles away to here is the content of the additional reward. Golden King coldly snorted. In just a few months, you can actually collect 1,500 human blood roses. You bastards are unexpectedly capable. Golden King, in his usual sarcastic tone, gave a rare relatively positive evaluation. However, the real challenge begins now, so there's no time to listen to you discuss the ridiculous way of the king. A group of lowly bastards don't need to expect to reach the realm of the king. Just do what you should do, bastards, don't let me down. With that, Golden King's voice gradually faded away. Obviously, he could not appear in front of them for a long time. Well, time is limited, so I'll simply talk about the current situation. After Golden King left, Wang Lu clapped his hands to attract the attention of the others. Thanks to the back door opened by Golden King, we have completed the other party's difficult conditions and have the qualification to pass the 5th level. But as long as we are still deliberately targeted by the administrator, it's only a matter of time before we are trapped to death. Golden King can't possibly open the back door for us every time, so from now on, we have to fight back. We can't passively wait for the other party to make their move. What do you want to do? Aya asked. It's very simple, we'll start with the reward. According to the principle of equivalent exchange, if the other party sets an impossible condition, we must prepare an impossible reward. With that, Wang Lu raised his right hand, and a gorgeous rain of flowers scattered all over the sky. Administrator. 999 roses have been collected. Now, it's time for you to redeem your reward. With a roar, Wang Lu broke the illusion that he had previously set up here. Fortunately, the illusion could only be seen from the outside, otherwise, if Aya saw it, she would definitely cause trouble. Shortly after the illusion was broken, the administrator's voice rang in the depths of the endless darkness. It's you? How is that possible? The always calm voice could not help but reveal a bit of shock. A moment later, a vague face composed of black mist slowly emerged. So it's you. After a close observation, the administrator finally recognized the identity of Wang Lu and his team. The ones who stirred up trouble in Bretonia are actually you. How did you leave the king's treasure house? Even if you have a space-type prop, to get out of the shackles of this artifact space. Could it be that the soul of the dead is helping you? After all, the administrator had been in control of the treasure house for 80 years and was very familiar with the treasure house. Thus, he quickly speculated the truth. However, after knowing the truth, he fell into great fear. If it was that haunting shadow, then... No, calm down first, things might not be that bad. The administrator calmed down and lightly said, You just said you want to redeem the reward? That's fine. Congratulations, according to the rules of the treasure house, even if it's a divine tool, I can give it to you. Don't you 9 regions people come here to find divine tools? Then. Wang Lu sneered and interrupted, Have you ever heard of a fable from 9 regions? A farmer met an immortal. The immortal had the golden touch technique. With a touch of his finger, he could turn stone into gold. The immortal asked the farmer what he wanted. The farmer didn't want a mountain of gold and silver, nor did he want immortality. He just wanted his finger that could turn stone into gold. In the same way, I don't need your rare treasures, divine tools, or immortal pets. I just want a fair competition qualification. I want to compete with you for the position of administrator. The administrator was greatly shocked and roared, What a joke. In your dreams. Greedy yellow-skinned bastards, you can't get anything. Really? Wang Lu said with a smile, If you have the ability, then show me. Let us get nothing and get out of the treasure house with our tails between our legs. But can you do it? I have collected all 999 human blood roses. If you have the ability, then trample on the rules of the treasure house and swallow the reward in front of me. Can you do it? Show me. The administrator was silent. As Wang Lu said, he really couldn't do it. He couldn't even extract the divine tool from the treasure house to reward Wang Lu. He was the administrator, but he didn't have full access to the treasure house. When it came to divine tools, he was powerless. Therefore, at this time, he was in a difficult position. Can't do it? Then, according to the rules, when you give the task but can't fulfill the reward, what is it? It's malfeasance. As the administrator of the Golden King, it's difficult for you to even perform the basic duties. What face do you have to steal the position of administrator? If you don't step down now, when will you? Enough. The administrator roared, you want a fair competition? Fine, I'll compete for you. While speaking, the dark space was lit up by a ray of light. The flower rain that Wang Lu sprinkled before was guided by this light, forming a bright road that went straight forward without an end. This is the road to the administrator. If you have the guts, come here. Chapter 327. Along the shining road that runs through the 5th floor, after no one knows how long, the space in front of them changed, and an unusually magnificent white-gray stone gate appeared in front of them. Aya asked in surprise, what is this place? Wang Lu was also stunned for a moment. He looked around and saw a group of people standing on a floating island. Behind them was the endless sea of clouds, and in front of them was the stone gate. In short, it's not the 6th floor of the king's treasure house. Unfortunately, the person who knows the situation the most doesn't come forward to explain, so everything can only be based on pure speculation. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, the stone gate in front of them suddenly buzzed and vibrated. Its rough surface twisted like water ripples, vaguely showing a human face, and then issued a dull, heart-shaking voice. No need to guess, this is the Golden King's Championship trial. Golden King's Championship trial? It should be the written interview for the administrator position. Wang Lu frowned. Are you the person in charge? Person in charge? No, there's no one in charge here. The stone gate spoke with a rumbling voice, its expression and tone revealing a bit of sadness. I'm just an ordinary stone gate. How much do you know about the championship trial? This is a road that only extraordinary brave people can embark on. Wang Lu nodded. That is, only by achieving a score that far exceeds the standard value in a certain floor of the king's treasure house can they have the opportunity to enter the championship trial, which is a random hidden instance. This road of trial is very long, but the further you go, the more you will get. The last person who opened the road of trial stopped at the 5th level and got the favor of the king. The favor of the king? Golden King is really blind to lead the wolf into the house. But in other words, as long as I can reach the 6th level, Holy Light Religion can say goodbye to the king's treasure house. There's no one in charge of this road of trial. Only the stone gates that guard each level are still silently waiting. If you meet their conditions, you can enter the next level. However, I haven't been in contact with the last few stone gates for a long time, so I don't know if there are any new changes. So that's how it is. Wang Lu pondered for a moment and did not continue to ask. Instead, he went straight to the point. As the guardian of the 1st level, what do you want? The stone gate replied, a long, long time ago, I accidentally lost one of the king's treasures. As a result, I was punished by the king and became the guardian of this place until today. If you can help me find that treasure, I will be very grateful to you. When Wang Lu heard this, he didn't immediately ask about the treasure. Instead, he asked curiously, what about the last challenger? What mission did you give him? It's the same mission as yours. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to find the treasure. The stone door said, however, he found some important clues. Then, as a compromise, I can allow him to pass this stage if he pays a sufficient price. Wang Lu said, then, is it convenient for you to tell me those clues? The stone gate replied, unfortunately, I can't do that. Moreover, if you submit a clue that he has already submitted, it will be invalid. Understood. Wang Lu nodded and understood. In other words, when it's my turn, I can only pass if I find the treasure itself? Alright, then tell me, what exactly is that treasure? The stone gate's voice was full of vicissitudes. That is a wine cup that the king likes very much. Although it's made of ordinary materials, only high-quality gold of blessing, it was personally made by the most famous jewelry grandmaster in the kingdom in a month. The craftsmanship is superb, and it was blessed with a beautiful blessing. Specifically, this is what it looks like. As he spoke, a cloud of mist slowly condensed into the shape of a wine cup in front of the stone gate. It had a golden luster. That wine cup was indeed made by a grandmaster. Its design and decorations were indeed superb. Oh, what a beautiful wine cup! Wang Lu couldn't help but praise. No wonder you became so miserable after losing it. The stone gate didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Wang Lu's words and also sighed. That's right. Among the 103 wine cups that the king likes the most, it ranks in the top 20. I deserve to die 10,000 times for losing it. Alright, then please help me find it. I remember that I lost it near the Ice Thorns Highland. But after such a long time, it will definitely be picked up by someone and continue to circulate on the continent. I will open a portal to the Ice Thorns Highland for you. You can start to collect clues from there. When you find the wine cup, break this crystal and you will be teleported back. As he spoke, a purple crystal fell from the stone gate, and the light of a portal lit up beside it. Alright, I've said what I need to say. I wish you good luck. I haven't talked to anyone for a long time, I'm so tired. With that, the stone gate fell into a deep sleep, and the ripple-like face disappeared behind the rock. Wang Lu, what do we do? The group stood next to the portal, waiting for the leader Wang Lu's instructions. Wang Lu held the transmission crystal in his hand and remained silent. Aya said, it's like they're deliberately making things difficult for us. How could we find the wine cup that has been lost for thousands of years? The Holy Light religion force is spread all over the continent, and they have a large number of people, yet they still couldn't find the real thing, only a clue. It's very likely that the real thing has been destroyed. After all, it's not a precious weapon or equipment, it's just a wine cup. I have seen a lot of things, but I've never even heard of it. It doesn't matter, I have a way. Have you forgotten that I'm the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Mountain? Wang Lu said and confidently patted his chest. And on that mountain, there's a treasure hunting famous 8th elder. That's not worth showing off at all. Ha ha ha, even if the 8th elder is unreliable, don't we still have the best sense of smell in the world, the most suitable spirit dog for finding things? Wang Lu said and then stretched out his hand, but not to the model dog. Instead, he patted Bai Shishuan's head. Spirit Platform Immortal Beast, Bai Shixian. The always indifferent little Bai suddenly blushed. You! Senior brother, don't tease me. Aya was both annoyed and amused as she patted away Wang Lu's hand that was on little Bai's head. Don't bully an honest person. Moreover, even if we ask Hua Hua to help, we haven't even seen the real wine cup, so no matter how sensitive our sense of smell is, it can't help us. In short, you can rest assured that I have a well-thought-out plan for this. With that, Wang Lu pulled the several people's hands and walked into the transmission array. The array flickered, and their figures disappeared from the floating island. At the same time, deep in the king's treasure house, the Holy One who was the administrator of the Holy Light religion issued a disdainful sneer. In front of him, a clear mirror reflected the scene on the floating island. Although he couldn't see the scene after leaving the transmission array, he heard the dialogue between Wang Lu and the stone gate word for word. Well thought out plan? What a joke! The administrator muttered to himself, in the past, the church mobilized the power of the entire church and mobilized hundreds of millions of believers to collect information, but in the end, they could only conclude that the wine cup came from the Ice Thorns Plateau, appeared in more than 30 countries in the continent, had experienced hundreds of masters, and finally disappeared 2,000 years ago. There was no news of it, and it was likely destroyed. Even the Prophet Holy One couldn't determine its location, so how could you yellow-skinned bastards think you can find it? Moreover, since we know that you are in the Ice Thorns Plateau, then your next stop is obvious. I have no interest in watching you play this game of treasure hunting. A group of people dare to leave Dragon City, leave the king's treasure house, you are seeking death. With a sneer, the Holy One clenched his fist, and the luxurious armrest of the chair cracked into pieces. It's so cold. Walking out of the transmission array, the cold wind howled and snow filled the sky. The goose feather-like snowflakes danced in the wind, and the tiny ice dregs were like daggers. And in the wind and snow, the bone-chilling cold unexpectedly made this group of experts with the same cultivation base as King Pill somewhat unbearable. Lu Li's physique was relatively delicate, so she couldn't help but shiver. She hastily summoned her fire element flying sword and poured her pure magical power into it, igniting it for warmth. However, the always sharp flame was now on the verge of collapse. As the spirit of heaven and earth, Bai Shixian was best at changing the environment, but at this time, she was somewhat at a loss. The Ice Thorns Plateau is a cursed land. Aya's voice was somewhat erratic due to the strong wind. In the Golden King's era, this place was still prosperous. But later, after several wars, a legendary-level Ice Queen fell here. Her curse has been left to this day, making the plateau no longer suitable for living creatures to live. The resentful spirits that were killed by the curse are entrenched here, adding to the gloominess of this place. Even if the wine cup is really left here, we can't just look for it in this cold wind. Let's leave first. There is a human city on the edge of the plateau, so we can take a rest there. After all, this group of people had formidable strength. Although they were slightly uncomfortable in this extremely harsh environment, it was not strenuous for them to break through the wind. Following the direction pointed by Aya, Wang Lu took the lead. His non-phase sword defense isolated all the wind and snow outside. The rest of them followed closely behind him. In just half a day, they flew away from the plateau and arrived at a bustling border town, Asgard. Although the city was small, it had everything. Moreover, it was bustling with people and was thriving. Although the Ice Thorns Plateau was a cursed land, as the saying goes, riches and honor come from danger. The plateau country that was suddenly destroyed because of the curse buried endless treasures in the snowfield. Moreover, under the extreme conditions of the plateau, after thousands of years of gestation, many heavenly treasures were formed. Therefore, it was highly respected by the adventurers. Many people were willing to go to the plateau to explore for treasures, and many of them had quite a lot of harvest. Located in the safe zone closest to the plateau, Asgard, as a transportation hub, was naturally prosperous. It's simply a paradise for adventurers. There are even a lot of high-order professions here. After entering the city, as far as Wang Lu could see, most of the people were adventurers. On the contrary, local people were rare. Most of the places in the city were inns, pubs, as well as equipment and prop shops. Aya said, I suggest that we start with the local church. The church here is the traditional ancient church that believes in the ice goddess. It has a very long history. If there is any important information in the plateau in the past 10,000 years, they generally know about it. That wine cup has been wandering for thousands of years, but the source is still on the plateau. Wang Lu smiled and shook his head. There's no need to be so troublesome. The time interval is 10,000 years. Even if the church has a record of everything, how long would it take for us to investigate it? Do we have so much time to waste now? Then what are you going to do? Let's go to the prop shop first. Since the business here is flourishing, there should be a wide variety of goods. After arriving at the prop shop, Wang Lu looked at the goods displayed in the shop and smiled. Looks like this is the place. Boss, I want 2 units of high-grade blessing gold ingots, then a multicolored stone, a red flame stone, an ice crystal stone, a storm stone, a thunder stone, a holy light stone, a dark shadow stone. Then, a mithril thread, a fine gold leaf. Hearing the list of materials Wang Lu had listed, Aya was curious at first, but then she widened her eyes and looked at Wang Lu in disbelief. You, don't tell me you want to. Wang Lu snorted coldly. Is there any other way? When that bastard asked me to find a cultural relic that had been missing for tens of thousands of years, I knew that it was time to show my real skills. Chapter 328. I say, what you're doing is too whimsical. After leaving the prop store, Aya was still shocked all the way. How could this method work? You actually want to blatantly fake it? People will definitely recognize it at a glance. Recognize it at a glance? Wang Lu, who was holding a pile of materials, looked back at Aya and disdainfully said, perhaps in the past, but now it's been thousands of years. Even if his mother comes back to life, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to recognize her. How could he possibly recognize the authenticity of the wine cup? But do you have a better way? Don't forget, we're not in the king's treasure house, but in the real world. The people of Holy Light religion are likely to know where we are. Fortunately, this place is on the edge of the Western continent, so the power of Holy Light religion is not strong enough. Otherwise, we might have been surrounded by a large number of high-order professions. Yes, we're in the real world. Aya softly said to herself. Don't even think about it. Wang Lu saw through Aya's idea at a glance. This is not Dragon City, so you should put down your Night King identity. Your people are not as fragile as you think. While talking, the group of people came to a luxurious inn in the city. Aya booked a room at the counter. The group of people walked into the room under the various gazes from all around and then closed the door. I always feel that the eyes of the people around us are strange. Lu Li was somewhat confused. Did we do something wrong? Wang Lu put down the box and said, a man leading a bunch of women to a room, what do you think the people around us would think? But now is not the time to think about this. Lu Li, Little Bai, Aya, the three of you may have to help later. No matter what, this wine cup was personally made by a jewelry master, so the quality is absolutely superior. If I make a counterfeit, perhaps I can't reproduce the vicissitudes of thousands of years of history, but the difference in quality can't be too obvious. Aya somewhat hesitated. Have you really learned imitation? Do you think the title of Spirit Sword Sect's top student is as unworthy as your Misty Peaks head chef title? Refining is an important part of the path of cultivation. According to my study plan, once I become a perfected king pill, I'll have to start practicing refining. Before that, I'll have to make sufficient preparations. Making imitation tools was a necessary preparation for refining tools. In the future, even if I officially start refining weapons, I will definitely start with imitation. As Wang Lu spoke, he had already sorted out the materials and prepared them. Then, he took out a snow-white flame floating in the air from his mustard seed bag. And, after all, it's essentially an artifact of the mortal world. Its biggest highlight is its creativity and not any special effects. Then, using a low-grade spiritual fire like the mysterious Yin fire should be more than enough. After that, Wang Lu fixed the flame in mid-air, took out the gold ingots and burned them on the fire. The gold ingots that had been blessed by the spell quickly melted when they came into contact with the flame. After that, Wang Lu's invisible mana floated in the air, and it quickly melted into a golden ball of liquid metal, which was propelled by his power and rotated rapidly. After that, Wang Lu separated out a trace of magical power and began to do some surprising processing on this golden ball. Aya, Lu Li, and Bai Shixian watched with rapt attention. They saw Wang Lu, like spinning silk from a cocoon, separated a trace of golden thread from the golden ball, and then quickly peeled it off. As the golden ball rotated, the peeled-off part became more and more, and the remaining part gradually formed the shape of a wine cup. Aya was dumbfounded. You're making pottery, okay? Wang Lu said, it doesn't matter, the principle is the same. It's completely different, okay? Normal wine glasses are made by hand. It doesn't matter, in any case, the quality of the finished product is the same. How could it be the same? Damn, what's the difference? Don't tell me that when you give birth to a child, the quality of the child is different because of the position? That's a complete sophistry. However, whether it was sophistry or eloquence, Wang Lu was indeed earnestly making the wine cup in his own way. During this period, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and even Aya also contributed their own efforts, using their unique ability to decorate the wine cup. More than 10,000 years ago, the jewelry master of the Golden Kingdom was indeed amazing. If it was purely based on professional skill, Wang Lu, as an amateur, was naturally far from it. However, he made up for it with the means of a cultivator, thus, he was able to imitate it. After a day and a night, when Bai Shixian and Lu Li joined forces to place the last piece of multicolored stone on the outer wall of the wine cup, the entire wine cup glowed with an amazing color. A ray of blessing light fell from the sky and fell on the wine cup. At this moment, even Aya was shocked. You actually guessed it. The biggest technical difficulty of the knockoff wine cup was actually not the method of the wine cup itself, but the faint blessing attached to it. The stone gate once tried to imitate 1 or 2 parts of the blessing aura with water mist. However, that 1 or 2 parts of imitation already made Aya quite surprised, because it didn't seem like it was attached with a spell or other means. The combination of blessing and the wine cup itself was very natural. Now it seemed like the blessing on the wine cup didn't come from external force, but was naturally generated by its unique structure. Golden King liked that wine cup mostly because of the natural way contained in it. Unexpectedly, Wang Lu actually recreated this blessing. The creativity belongs to other people, what I did is just a craftsman's work. I have the means of a cultivator, but I still can't do it. What a cultivator. Now, let's see if this thing can handle it. Wang Lu said, fiddled with the wine cup in his hand, and then directly took out the purple crystal and crushed it, activating the transmission spell. Aya was surprised. Wait a minute, this is too hasty. However, the next moment, they appeared on the floating island, and in front of them was the heavy stone gate. Wang Lu directly threw the glittering wine cup in front of the gate. I found it, please check it. He was speechless. After a long time, the surface of the stone gate once again rippled like water, which then formed into a human face. You're back? The voice of the stone gate was vague and somewhat surprised. So fast? Then, the stone gate's attention fell on the wine cup on the ground. Suddenly, the entire floating island trembled. This is. The stone gate rumbled, and countless sand and gravel fell from various cracks. 2 waterfalls of gravel flowed down from the human face formed by the water ripples. Finally see it again. The king's wine cup, this is the king's. The emotional voice of the stone gate stopped abruptly, and the trembling of the island also abruptly stopped. A moment later, an even more violent tremor burst out. The human face on the stone gate twisted and let out an angry roar. Are you playing with me? The powerful sound wave hit his face like a substance. Wang Lu propped up his non-phase sword defense to isolate it. However, the vast sea of clouds behind him was directly shaken by this sound wave, leaving behind an empty space of several miles. If you have something to say, then say it, what are you shouting for? The stone gate held up the wine cup with an invisible force and said word by word, is this what you mean by found it? How dare you trick me with a fake? Do you think I'm an idiot? After Wang Lu said that, Aya could not help but pass her voice through primordial spirit. Wang Lu, I told you this is too hasty. Even if you made it exactly the same as the real thing, but the real thing is, after all, thousands of years old. If you take out a brand new one, how can you get away with it? Wang Lu ignored Aya's complaint and still faced the stone gate. This is the real thing, I didn't fake it. You still say you didn't fake it? The stone gate angrily said, this wine cup has been lost in the mortal world for more than 10,000 years and has experienced countless history, how could it be as new as before? Wang Lu lightly asked, why can't it be as new as before? Do you know what it has experienced for more than 10,000 years? The stone gate was suddenly silent. He was punished by Golden King and guarded this place for more than 10,000 years. How could he know what had happened in the mortal world? However, it was wishful thinking to get away with it. Do you think I can be fooled? The last person who came to the trial has given quite reliable evidence. He mobilized hundreds of millions of people in the mortal world to collect clues, proving that the king's wine cup has been in the hands of more than 100 people and has experienced several major wars. There is serious damage on the wine cup, at least there should be a deep crack between the two gems, it can't be as flawless as this one. Wang Lu let out an "oh" sound and then said disapprovingly, and then. The stone gate angrily said, "You want to say that that person's evidence is fake and he's deceiving me? Unfortunately, you've got the wrong idea. Every clue he said has sufficient historical evidence, but you, on the other hand, are just empty words without any evidence." Wang Lu sneered, "Empty words? Ridiculous, no matter how many historical materials and clues that person provided, they are all just circumstantial evidence. What I have in my hands is the real and most favorable evidence. Between the two, which one is more important? Even if you think with your knees, you can understand it. It's not the side with more evidence." The stone gate was not good at debating. After being rebutted by Wang Lu, he angrily said, "Then how do you explain the crack? That crack was at least 1,000 years ago, right?" Wang Lu said, "According to what you said, the previous person's clues are not complete, and no one knows the final whereabouts of the wine cup." "Yes, but the clues he provided cover more than 8,000 years of history. Only the last 2,000 years are blank, and the value is high enough," Wang Lu interrupted. "In other words, no one knows the last 2,000 years of the wine cup's history. 2,000 years isn't a short period of time. It's enough for countless dynasties to rise and fall. Anything can happen during this period of time. How can you be so sure that the crack on this cup will remain forever and can't be repaired?" The stone gate was stunned. In fact, aren't you curious as to how we found the wine cup so quickly? Let me tell you, this wine cup, we found it in the Plateau of Ice Thorns. Plateau of Ice Thorns? The stone gate said in surprise, "That's impossible. The wine cup was taken away from the plateau by someone 10,000 years ago." "Yes, but it eventually came back. Guess who did it?" "Who?" "It itself." Wang Lu pointed his finger at the wine cup. 1,000 years ago, because of a chance coincidence, it condensed its own spirituality and became a spiritual treasure. Spiritual treasure? The stone gate was shocked and whispered. Although there were many differences between the Western continent and 9 regions, there were also many similarities. It was not uncommon for magical treasures to have spirituality in the Western continent. Yes, although its body is just a wine cup, it was created by a grandmaster, and it was also favored by the Golden King. After thousands of years of suffering, it's not strange for it to gather its own wisdom, right? If you look carefully, you should be able to find a trace of spiritual afterglow on the wine cup. The stone gate quickly carefully observed the wine cup, and after a moment, he slowly said, "Indeed, it really has a spiritual aura." At this time, Aya, who was standing behind Wang Lu, was stunned. "Is this possible? That so-called spiritual afterglow is clearly the residual fluctuation of the mysterious Yin fire, right?" Seeing that the stone gate had gradually fallen into the trap, Wang Lu inwardly sneered, but his facial expression became more and more dignified. The promotion of a magical treasure is equivalent to a human cultivator recasting their body. The previous thousands of years of vicissitudes are all smoothed out and become brand new. The reason why this wine cup is so dazzling is because it has experienced a resurrection. The stone gate was silent for a long time, and then asked, "So, where is the spirit now?" Wang Lu coldly said, "What do you think? There is only a trace of afterglow, so of course, the original body has fallen. This wine cup spirit was resurrected 1,000 years ago. Then, in order to return to its master, it did not hesitate to consume its own existence and traveled thousands of miles back to the Plateau of Thorns of Ice, which is the place where you lost it. It endured the snow and the curse of the plateau, silently waiting for you to send someone to find it back. Because it thought that if it returned to its original place, it would have a greater chance of being found. Unfortunately, the previous idiots refused to search the plateau seriously. When they heard that it was taken away from the plateau, they hurriedly left that land of death and went to other parts of the continent to trace its history. However, they never thought that its original body was so hard-working. We were all so lucky. We didn't walk far on the plateau before we saw it. In fact, it should be said that it took the initiative to find us. At that time, its life was almost exhausted, but when it sensed that someone was teleported from the floating island to the plateau, it gathered its strength and moved in front of me. When I held it up, it didn't even have time to say a few words before it completely fell. Wang Lu's cold voice was like thunder, bombarding the stone gate's thoughts. What's funny is that its last few words didn't pour out its pain and longing during the long wait. Instead, it was used to explain its abnormality, explaining how it had gathered its spirituality by coincidence and recovered to its original state. It was afraid that people would suspect its authenticity. Now, if you have the ability, tell me again that this wine cup is a fake, a worthless imitation of trash. Facing Wang Lu's harsh words, the stone gate could no longer hold on. Crushed stones and tears rolled down like rain. I'm really stupid. In the midst of crying, the stone gate slowly opened, revealing a staircase leading to the next stage. Chapter 329. Even after leaving the floating island for a long time, Aya was still immersed in shock. How could that be possible? Aya seriously recalled the eloquence of Wang Lu. After thinking about it, she could only admire him. Actually, there are still a lot of loopholes in your story. Hearing Aya's sigh, Wang Lu said with a smile, after all, the story is essentially a lie. According to strict logical reasoning, it is certainly not tenable. However, logic is not omnipotent. The story has been so sensational, what else can he do? After a pause, Wang Lu said, fortunately, the stone gate is a human, so it has the wisdom and feelings of human beings. It can be impulsive and misjudge. Otherwise, this level would be a bit difficult. But if it's not a human, how could it make such an unreasonable request? In fact, my story is essentially based on it. A fool who has been exiled and punished for more than 10,000 years, but is still loyal to the Golden King and brooding over his past mistakes. Along the stairs, the group walked in a dark independent space. Only the stairs under their feet shone. Before long, the scenery in front of them changed, and another stone gate appeared in front of them. Only, this time, it was not an open area. Behind the stone gate, there was obviously a long and narrow corridor. Deeper in the corridor, there was an endless unknown. Is the next level the second level? Wang Lu was eager to try. My adventurer's spirit is already unbearably hungry. Unfortunately, the second level did not have a shortcut like the first level. Because the stone gate was just a stone gate, it did not have its own wisdom. Perhaps its design was relatively rigid, or perhaps after more than 10,000 years, the original intelligent life has gone extinct. In short, there were vague handwriting on the stone gate, which explained the rules of the second level in ancient language. But perhaps because of the long time, many of them were already blurred and difficult to understand. After the efforts of Wang Lu and Aya, the final result was, the endless labyrinth contains endless unknowns. Every weakness of human nature will be captured. The tough test needs to be faced with blades and swords. Only when the 5 of us are united can we enter and reach the other side. Wang Lu repeated the rules a few times and tried to summarize them. Simply put, it's a huge labyrinth that requires a team of 5 to open. There are all kinds of traps, some to test one's character, and some to test one's combat power. It's a comprehensive labyrinth dungeon. Aya said, if the difficulty of this championship trial is progressively higher, then the difficulty of this level is likely to be higher than the previous one. Moreover, as far as I know, in the era of the Golden King, most of those who could obtain the title of champion were strong people who were close to the legendary realm. With our current lineup, I'm afraid. What is there to be afraid of? With a former legend like you around, can't we just crush them all the way? Aya was a little shaken. I'm sorry, but I'm in a very bad situation right now. Wang Lu asked in surprise and concern, what's wrong? Does someone with a heroic spirit physique have a menstrual period? Doesn't that mean I'll get pregnant? Aya, ha ha ha, I know what you're worried about. It doesn't matter. Since I promise to be your invincible faith, when you're in a bad situation, I'll cut through the thorns and thorns. Wang Lu said and then came to the door in high spirits. Well, if there's any test, bring it on. I'll let you see the real skill of clearing the dungeon. Behind him, Aya somewhat helplessly shook her head and smiled, but her heart was gradually filled with warmth. Yes, although he always does things unexpectedly, but perhaps I can really believe in him. I believe that he can help me rebuild my country and restore the glory of Britonia. If it's him, he can certainly do it. With that thought in mind, Aya felt that her heroic spirit physique had further solidified. The haze that was caused by Wang Lu's presumptuous decision was also dispelled. Well, although from a rational point of view, Wang Lu hasn't really convinced me, but, for the time being, I'll trust him for the time being. However, Aya's impassioned words, which gradually warmed her heart, were met with silence from the stone door. The gray door was tightly closed, shutting out the group of challengers. Moreover, there was no sign of it opening. Wang Lu gawked for a moment, unable to figure out why the door didn't open. He walked forward and knocked on the door. Open the door, we're good people. No response. Open sesame. No response. Little rabbit, be good and open your legs. There was still no response, except for Aya angrily punching Wang Lu. That's strange. Wang Lu pondered. Did we do something wrong? Or is there something wrong with the way we enter the door? It's not like we have to resort to violence as soon as we open the door, right? Aya said, it's best not to try to break this door by force. I don't think that's a good idea. Lu Li also added, I also think it's better not to break the door. Since the two people with the sharpest intuition said so, Wang Lu gave up the idea and turned his eyes back to the writing on the stone door. Only when 5 people are united can we enter and reach the other side. Could it be this sentence? Wang Lu said, only when a team of 5 people can we continue to move forward. Is there a problem with this sentence? But, even if we must gather 5 people to move forward, we have already gathered them. Lu Li curiously said, have you gathered them? Senior brother, 1 for you, 1 for Aya, 1 for Little Bai, and 1 for Hua Hua. There are obviously 4 of them. Wang Lu looked at her as if he was looking at an unlucky naughty child. Or, Lu Li, your IQ is no longer recognized in the human category? Having said that, Wang Lu certainly didn't think that Lu Li was really out of the human category. There were many times when this little girl was stupid and adorable, but at most, her brain lacked a few tendons. Correspondingly, her other tendons were exceptionally developed. Her memory and calculation ability were so strong that even he, the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, was dumbfounded. If it wasn't Lu Li, then who was it? Wang Lu's first reaction was naturally Quan Zouhua. This modeled dog was the most different from the human standard. However, strictly speaking, there was no reason to exclude it from the team. First, as the highest level mythological beast, Hua Hua would transform into a human sooner or later. Although in the Western continent mythology, there was no precedent of Fenrir transforming into a human, on Spirit Sword Mountain, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall believed that it was only a matter of time. Second, Western continent and 9 regions were different. The distinction between Chinese and barbarian was not so strict, and the boundary between human and beast was also relatively vague. It must be known that most of the professions in Western continent had the bloodline of strange beasts. For example, Aya was the inheritor of the dragon bloodline. And in the era of Golden King, this kind of hybridity was brought to the extreme. Some of the generals under the command of Golden King were magical beasts, and none of them had ever transformed into a human. So, what reason did this stone door have to shut Fenrir outside? After thinking about it, this stone door was still closed, which was really hard to figure out. And at this time, Lu Li suddenly said, the stairs to come here are gone. Wang Lu looked back and sure enough, the shining stairs had faded and disappeared. The team was isolated in front of the stone door, in a small square. What should I do? I'm hungry. Luli very decisively put forward the most realistic question. It was not that she was gluttonous, but in the past 3 days, when she concentrated on making wine cups in the inn, she actually didn't eat anything. With her current physique, she indeed didn't need to eat. However, eating has become a habit, and it was more of a psychological dependence. Just like a smoker who hasn't smoked for 3 days, that kind of hunger and thirst was hard to resist. Wang Lu still had some food in his mustard seed bag, so he threw a few meat pies to Luli, which made her smile. However, the current predicament was still a headache. Really troublesome, we can't just stand still in the second level. Not to mention with the composition of foodies in the team, sooner or later the food will run out. At that time, do I have to rely on my physical advantage of non-phase method to infinitely squeeze out protein to maintain their survival? Wang Lu's thoughts drifted, and soon, from the food storage problem to the agricultural breeding problem, he thought that if he brought the crop seeds, as well as breeding pigs and sheep, he could open up a small piece of farmland here to play with the monogatari. Breeding? Wang Lu felt a flash of inspiration in his mind and suddenly understood the reason why the stone door was closed. So that's how it is. The reason why the number is not enough is because there is an overlap. Wang Lu said, walked to the front of the mottled dog, and then stretched out his foot to kick it. Damn, what are you doing? The dog was sleeping sweetly, so being interrupted made its whole body uncomfortable. I'm looking for you to make up the number. With that, Wang Lu reached out his hand and touched the dog's head. In his jade mansion, a mark disintegrated. That was the master-servant contract between Wang Lu and Quan Zouhua, which was now unilaterally lifted by Wang Lu. Quan Zouhua felt that the shackles on its brain suddenly broke, and its whole body suddenly burst out with a bit of vitality, making it feel very comfortable. However, it didn't have the time to experience this. It hurriedly stood up. Damn, do you want to casually abandon a small animal? Rest assured, I'll take care of your food. Wang Lu said, I just need you to become an independent existence to make up the number of people. Wang Lu thought that if the number of people was not recognized, the biggest possibility would be because of the contract between him and Quan Zouhua. Right now, as his pet, the stupid dog was attached to him. Naturally, it would not be recognized as an independent team, so there were actually only 4 of them. However, as long as the stupid dog was released, with its qualification, how could it not count? And sure enough, when the contract was lifted, the stone door soon opened with a rumbling vibration, revealing a deep and huge maze. A dangerous and mysterious aura hit them in the face. The structure of the maze was breathtaking. Not long after the entrance corridor, in front of them, there was a sudden opening, showing infinite light. A bright and warm sun hung high in the sky. Not only did it not have the gloomy underground city corridor that made people despair, but instead, everything was directly revealed in front of them. Under the clear sky, the open labyrinth was divided into countless small units. Some of the units were empty grasslands, some were deep forests, and some were pitch black even though they were clearly illuminated by the sun. These units were separated by space barriers. Although there was no brick or other fixed-form material, it was more unbreakable than any brick and was difficult to break through with brute force. In front of everyone was a narrow corridor isolated by space barriers. In front of the corridor was the transmission entrance to the first unit. Ayaya, the most troublesome transmission maze. Wang Lu felt annoyed when he saw this scene. Among all the mazes, this kind of transmission maze was the most troublesome one based on complex space spells. Moreover, there was no telling how many sharp traps were arranged in each of the small units. This stage was similar to the first stage, but it was more like a test of the trial taker's patience. Unfortunately, when encountering this level, I am the most impatient type. Wang Lu coldly said and strode forward. Aya curiously asked, how are you going to be impatient? Any maze has a common solution: dig the wall, dig the ground. While speaking, he launched his original magical ability, and the bloody sky covered an area of 100 feet. Chapter 330. I can't believe you actually came here. While walking on the stairs leading to the third level, Aya has gradually become numb to Wang Lu's maze strategy. In short, it was impossible to expect him to honestly follow the designer's idea. The second level was a very elaborate maze, but he directly used his original magical ability to go all the way, crushing all the space barriers, and directly went to the exit. The whole process took no more than half an hour. Of course, it was also thanks to the fact that there was no administrator who controlled the operation of the maze. Everything was done according to the preset program, lacking the ability to respond to unexpected situations. Wang Lu's original magical ability was undoubtedly an unexpected situation. His original magical ability, according to the law, was equivalent to the inherent enchantment of the Western continent. It belonged to a very rare high-end skill, which had a very unique magical effect in disintegrating space. Of course, if the opponent was a living person, there would naturally be a way to work around it. However, this time, Wang Lu's opponent was a rigid maze. Therefore, the group of people were put into the broken sword world by Wang Lu. As if a space tunnel was opened, they went straight all the way, crossed hundreds of mechanism units, and went straight to the end. This is thanks to the fact that there is no administrator in this level. Wang Lu was not particularly proud of this. After thousands of years, this champion's trial is not perfect anymore, so there's no sense of accomplishment in crushing it. However, I'm afraid the next one is not so easy. Huh? You said, where is the administrator who generously promised to accept the challenge on the 5th floor of the king's treasure house? Wang Lu earnestly said, this champion's trial is essentially the same as the king's treasure house, but the difficulty is higher, and the design is more unique. Then, according to the situation in the king's treasure house, I guess it won't be long before we have to face the Holy Light Religion people. The opponent is a living person, so it's not easy to pass by relying on little tricks. At the same time, in the depths of the king's treasure house, the Holy Light Religion's Holy One was somewhat anxiously waiting for his subordinate's reply. For days ago, through the administrator's authority, he saw the experience of Wang Lu and the others at the entrance of the champion's trial. He knew that they were sent to the Ice Thorn Plateau to look for the king's wine cup. After that, he immediately ordered the elite forces of the Inquisition to head to the plateau to hunt down Wang Lu and his party. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, even the head Inquisitor himself had personally come out. He was one of the 5 great legendary powers of the Church. Although he was the weakest of the 5, he was still powerful enough to crush everything. Logically speaking, the lineup of this operation was luxurious and could be said to be foolproof, but the saints still felt uneasy. What exactly went wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Their operation was very secretive, and only a few saints knew everything. Even the 13 high-grade professionals who participated in the operation did not know what they were going to do in the highlands. At the same time, the church reacted very quickly this time. Because they followed a special procedure, it only took the time of a meal from the order to the mobilization of manpower. On the other hand, it would only take them 3 to 4 days to travel from the Holy City to the Ice Thorns Plateau. Furthermore, with the head Inquisitor, no one within a radius of 10,000 miles would be able to hide. Furthermore, their team's combat power was also completely overwhelming. There was no possibility of anything going wrong. However, just as the saint was feeling worried, an emergency signal was sent. The head Inquisitor's voice rang directly in the saint's soul. It was a little incredulous and a little angry. They disappeared. The administrator was shocked. Disappeared. How? The head Inquisitor said in a deep voice, I also don't know the reason, but in the Book of Purification, their names directly disappeared in an instant. To be able to get rid of the Book of Purification's tracking, it is very likely that they used a powerful teleportation tool and entered an unknown space. Did they discover your existence? The head Inquisitor said. Impossible. My battlefield intuition did not sound the alarm. It is impossible for them to discover us from so far away. If they didn't discover you, why did they run? It's only been 3 days, and they haven't left the Ice Thorns Plateau yet. They simply can't find enough clues to pass. The saint continued to speculate about the various possibilities, but he felt that the situation in front of him was more and more chaotic. Suddenly, a light flashed in front of the saint's eyes, and an incredible idea leaped into his mind. Could it be, then, he did not even care about being rude and threw the head inquisitor aside. His consciousness sank into an independent space in the king's treasure house, and he used his authority to open a peeping window. Through the window, he saw a scene that made his eyes almost pop out of their sockets. Wang Lu and the others had already passed the 2nd stage and were about to enter the 3rd stage. How was this possible? It had only been 4 days since they entered the Trial of Champions, and they had already passed 2 stages? Was this Trial of Champions really in disrepair? Had it malfunctioned? 90 years ago, how long did it take him to pass the Trial of Champions? 8 years? 10 years? Just the 1st stage, which was to find the wine glasses, took him an entire year as a saint to mobilize the entire church. Although the 2nd stage did not have any life-threatening traps, it was very time-consuming. With 4 of his most trusted subordinates, it took him a year and a half to reach the end. But Wang Lu and the others had passed 2 stages in 4 days. Was there any justice in this world? With strong anger and injustice, the administrator wished he could directly tear open the window and appear in front of that group of people to punish them and catch them all in one fell swoop. However, he had to calm down. Even if he was a legendary level, he would still die if he recklessly acted in the Golden King's treasure house. But should he sit back and watch them continue to advance triumphantly? Absolutely not. Hey, what's wrong? On the other side, the Supreme Inquisitor, who was thousands of miles away, couldn't get a response for a long time, so he somewhat doubtfully asked. The administrator sighed. You guys, come back. The whereabouts of Wang Lu and the others have been found. What? Where? The king's treasure house. The king's treasure house? How could it be? However, the administrator had no intention to explain. He impatiently said, "Come back and tell me the details." Upon hearing this, the Supreme Inquisitor was furious. Paul, you motherf***cur. You can summon me and send me away at will. Do you think I'm your subordinate? We are both legendary saints of Holy Light religion. Where did your sense of superiority come from? Moreover, if it weren't for the bad information you provided, why would I waste a few days running around? This incompetent waste really makes people want to kill him. In fact, St. Paul, as the administrator of the king's treasure house, has always been a weirdo in the church. Wisdom, temperament, and talent, none of them were outstanding. However, as a professional, his qualifications were amazing, and his luck was also against the heaven's will. Those geniuses of the same generation were submerged in the long river of history, but he, this mediocre talent, stood out and even advanced to the legendary level. Originally, he was the last among the legendary saints of the church. However, 90 years ago, he coincidentally opened the king's treasure house and obtained the administrator's authority, which immediately changed the strategic situation of the Holy Light religion for the next 100 years. Because of this, his status also rose sharply, surpassing the Supreme Inquisitor and the leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights, ranking 3rd among the 5 legendary saints, second only to the Pope and the Prophet. However, no matter how angry the Supreme Inquisitor was, he knew that this was no longer a personal grudge. The king's treasure house was the core of the church. After 80 years of development, the importance of this place had even surpassed the church's former birthplace, so it absolutely could not be lost. Moreover, the Pope had instructed a few saints in private before. He said that Paul's ability was limited, but his identity was very important. If possible, the others should take care of him and accommodate him. Anyway, Paul seemed to have a high status, but he didn't have much real power in the church. Except for the king's treasure house, he didn't even have an archbishop that he could order around. He could be considered as a loner. At the same time, Paul in the king's treasure house was burning with anxiety. It was already the third level. According to this trend, perhaps the third level wouldn't be a problem for Wang Lu and his group. But once they let him enter the fourth level, it would be a test of life and death. The administrator's authority was obtained by gathering the power of the entire church to pass the first 4 levels and enter the 5th level as a reward. According to the rules of the treasure house, as long as Wang Lu and his group achieved better results than him in the champion's trial, they could replace him. What did it mean to be better? If they could pass the 5th level, they would win without any suspense. And even if they couldn't, as long as they passed the 4th level, they would be standing on the same level as Paul. At this time, the comparison would be based on the results of the previous levels. Excellent and good meant the difference in results. Although Paul's results in the past were not bad, how could he be compared with Wang Lu, who passed 2 levels in 4 days? Once Wang Lu passed the 4th level, the administrator's title would definitely fall into his hands. Therefore, when he saw Wang Lu enter the 3rd level, Paul was already impatient. Unfortunately, because of the riots caused by the eastern city-states and the 9 regions' people, the Pope and the Prophet had gone to the east to suppress it, and the leader of the bloodlust Holy Knight was guarding the border. At this time, Paul wanted to ask for help, but he didn't know who to ask. In his view, the problem he encountered as a saint, naturally, only a saint could solve it. Why isn't the Chief Inquisitor here yet? Although he knew that even if the Chief Inquisitor had legendary level strength, it was impossible for him to cross half of the continent in an instant, Paul still couldn't help but resent him. At this time, through the peephole, he saw that Wang Lu and his team had reached the entrance of the 3rd level and began to attack in an orderly manner. And Wang Lu seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Do I have to shed all pretense of cordiality, break the peephole, and directly make a move? In anxiety, Paul even came up with an extreme idea. With his status as an administrator, if he risked being punished by the rules of the treasure house, he could indeed forcibly intervene in the process of Wang Lu's trial and interrupt him. Of course, as the price, the punishment he would receive would also be very severe, but it was better than watching the other party advance triumphantly, right? Thinking of this, Paul finally tried to contact the Pope and the Prophet, but unfortunately, he didn't get a response. And the Chief Inquisitor was still in the distant snowfield. Paul gritted his teeth and decided not to wait for the Chief Inquisitor to come back. Well, I don't recommend making a move at this time. At this time, a gentle voice suddenly came from his side. Paul was shocked. He turned around and saw a pale face without any facial features. Faceless, it's you. Regarding this church's sharpest knife, Paul's feelings were slightly complicated. On the one hand, Faceless One's position in the church was very special. Although his rank was below the 5 saints, only the Prophet and the Pope had the right to dispatch him. Other than that, he didn't listen to anyone. His real status even faintly suppressed Paul, which made people couldn't help but feel awe. Moreover, Faceless One had once directly or indirectly helped him. But on the other hand, Faceless One was not a legend. Facing Faceless One, Paul always felt a sense of superiority. Faceless One didn't care about the other's psychological activities at all. He just lightly explained, if you make a move now, it will be completely contrary to the current situation. The entire treasure house will become your resistance, which may be exactly what they want. It's better to wait until they reach the 4th level. We can integrate more forces in the next few days. Moreover, in the 4th level, we can reasonably intervene without worrying about the treasure house's resistance. But in the 4th level, we have no way out. Why would there be a need to retreat in a battle that is bound to be won? Faceless One lightly asked. Paul was startled, but then he quickly thought of something and said, very well, then I'll do as you say. If there's any mistake, Faceless One coldly said, if there's really a mistake, even if you push all the responsibility on me, you'll lose the treasure house's administrator authority and are nothing more than a waste. So, use your poor brain power on the right place, think less of useless things. You. How dare you talk to me like that? Paul flew into a rage. Don't forget who made you stand here. 90 years ago, based on your words, how dare you hope to reach the 5th level on the road of trial? Faceless One lightly said, so sit down, shut your mouth, and listen to me carefully. This time, you're the one who needs my help, remember this. Paul's heart was extremely angry. However, seeing that pale face, a throbbing feeling from the depths of his soul was like a bucket of cold water poured on his head, making him unable to say anything more. Chapter 331. Tisk, it's a disturbing piece. Walking on the dazzling stairs, looking at the light at the exit in front of them, Wang Lu could not help but sigh. After passing through the 2nd level of the labyrinth, the group set out for the 3rd level. In the road of the championship trial, there was a long shining staircase between each level. Wang Lu had always suspected that the people of Holy Light religion might not be able to bear it and would make their move at this time. However, all the way to the end, they didn't encounter the expected obstruction. Holy Light religion seemed to be ignorant of the fact that Wang Lu had passed 2 levels in a row. Although no one would hinder him, which would only make his strategy smoother, Wang Lu still felt somewhat uneasy. At this time, Lu Li, who had the most amazing eyesight in the team, had already seen the scenery at the end. She happily said, I see the stone door, and there are words written on it. It's the ancient language of the Western continent, it seems to be, military strategy? Wang Lu was surprised. You actually know the ancient language of the Western continent? Lu Li giggled and said, Aya gave me an ancient language dictionary a few days ago, and I have memorized it all. Good, you're indeed the strongest brain. Wang Lu commented, and at the same time, he also saw the scenery at the end. In front of them, on the surface of a gray stone door, there was indeed the word military strategy written in quaint handwriting. Military strategy. Does it mean the point of this level is to show military strategy? Wang Lu said as he crossed the last step of the shining staircase and officially stepped on the square in front of the door. Before his voice fell, he heard a dull sound in front of him. Yes, the point of this level is to show military strategy. While speaking, a wave-like ripple rippled on the surface of the stone door. Wang Lu smiled. Are you also punished to guard the door here because you lost Golden King's treasure? The stone door said, Me? I lost a bet to Golden King and can't pay the bet, so I can only come here to accept my punishment. Although the sound of this stone door was dull, its character was much more lively and talkative than the first stone door. I was once the leader of a tribe and commanded a powerful army. I fought all over the place and conquered a large territory. Because I won every battle, I was given the title of God of War. Unfortunately, I later met the Golden King. His country and army were far superior to mine. I knew that I could not be his opponent in a head-on fight, so I made a bet with him. Both sides would bring the same-sized army to fight in the Doomsday Mountain. If I won, his army would not be able to cross my border. If I lost, I would surrender on the spot. You can kill me if you want. At that time, I was confident that my ability to command was unparalleled in the world. Even the Golden King would not be able to beat me if the size of his army was the same as mine. Unfortunately, in the battle of the Doomsday Mountain Range, I was defeated by him and had to surrender. At that time, I heard that Golden King was cruel and heartless, so I thought I was going to die. However, he said that as a bastard, my military talent was rare in the world, so it would be a pity to kill me. When I heard that this seemed to be the hope of survival, I hurriedly expressed my willingness to use my talent for him. If there is any enemy, just leave it to me. In any case, although I can't beat the Golden King, I can still win every battle if I meet other people. However, Golden King sneered at this and said that if I could find an enemy worthy of his conquest, it would be considered as a meritorious deed for him. At that time, I knew that my tribe was the only force on the continent that had not surrendered to him. Upon hearing this, the others didn't have much reaction, but Aya was surprised. The last tribe conquered by Golden King, You are the barbarian god of war, Tanu? Oh, I can't believe that there are still people who remember my name. The stone door Tanu looked very happy. Ha ha ha, sure enough, the longer you live, the easier it is to encounter surprises. At that time, I said that I was willing to offer my ability, but Golden King said that there was no opponent worthy of his conquest on the continent. My ability was useless, so he suppressed me in his treasure house to guard the door. Although it was a punishment, it allowed me to stay alive in the form of a stone door for thousands of years. It's more like a reward from Golden King, ha ha ha. Alright, let's get back to business. Tanu restrained his smile and seriously said, this test is about your strategic ability. I will provide you with an army, and you just need to command these troops to defeat the opponent. That's simple, right? Wang Lu asked, simple? The opponent won't be you, right? Tanu laughed. Of course it's me, otherwise, who else could it be? But don't worry, I'm here to guard the door, not to bully people. I don't bring a lot of troops, only 400 golden guardians, 30 golden warlocks, and 8 legion commanders. Moreover, I won't be here myself. How many troops do we have? That depends on you. Tanu said, and then ripples appeared on the surface of his body, presenting a table. Wang Lu identified the handwriting on the table and said with some surprise, Golden Guardians, 10 logistics points, Golden Warlocks, 20 logistics points, Legion Commanders, 50 logistics points. In addition, there are archers, chariots, strange beast cavalry, and the required logistics points are different. Is this a certain number of logistics points, and then we are free to form an army? Tanu said, yes, the core of the army is the guarantee of logistics and food. Only with a strong logistics ability can a huge army be supported. Wang Lu nodded and said, this design is reasonable. In short, it's similar to an upper limit of population. You have 400 golden guardians, 30 warlocks, and 8 commanders, which means 5,000 logistics points. Then how many do we have? Tanu said, it also depends on you. Here, look here. While they were talking, a stone platform rose in front of the stone door. On the platform, there was a chessboard with many small squares painted on it. On it, there were 2 chess pieces and several dice. Wang Lu leaned forward and looked at it for a while. He saw that there was a zigzagging square on the chessboard. The square was connected from end to form a ring. Most of the squares were written with different numbers, and some were painted with a single color. In addition to chess pieces and dice, there were several stacks of cards on the chessboard, and there were also some exquisite small building models. Seeing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but change his expression. This is, Tanu said with a smile, this is a very popular game on the continent when I was alive. It's called simulation business chess. Simulation your sister, isn't this clearly a monopoly? Wang Lu pointed at the chessboard, isn't it just buying land, collecting taxes, and then using various events and props to harm people? Tanu was surprised and said, I can't believe that even you aliens from the East know about this game. Forget it, I'll just think of it as a beautiful coincidence. The world is big, and there are always a few nerds who are stupid enough to design tabletop games. In short, you mean that I want to play Monopoly with you, and then use the points to determine my logistics points? Tanu said, that's right, so the amount of logistics points depends on you. Of course, I won't bully people, so even if you lose miserably in simulation business chess, I will at least give you 5,000 basic points to ensure that you have the same number of troops as me. And on this basis, if you have the ability, win all 20,000 points in my hand within 100 rounds. By then, you will have more than 10 times the number of troops I have. However, I doubt if you can do it. Gentle reminder, when playing chess, you'd better protect yourself with all your strength. Protect the 5,000 points in your hand and don't lose them. Haha. Obviously, this former tribal god of war was extremely confident in his chess skills. Interesting, you actually dare to show off your gaming talent in front of me. Wang Lu sneered and walked to the front of the stone table. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. After an hour. This is impossible. Tanu's shocked voice echoed in the narrow space. On the chessboard, the red color chosen by Wang Lu occupied more than 90% of the area. Tanu's blue color could only occupy a corner, and his own chess piece was wrapped in red, unable to move an inch. With the result of the dice roll just now, his chess piece moved to the red square, so the last hope of turning the tables disappeared. Wang Lu sighed softly, stood up from the stone table, and scattered the gemstones in his hand on the chessboard. The 93rd round of the game is over, 25,000 points are in my hand. Humph, I can't believe that the barbarian god of war is so tenacious, to be able to hold on until the end before dying. This is impossible. Tanu's voice trembled, he still couldn't believe what just happened. As a gatekeeper on this trial path, he had guarded it alone for more than 10,000 years. During this period of time, his only entertainment was playing chess with the other gatekeepers who still had some intelligence. 10,000 years was enough for him to hone his chess skills to the point of perfection. However, as time passed, more and more gatekeepers died, and he had no way to display his brilliant chess skills, which made him feel even more lonely. More than 80 years ago, he unexpectedly met a group of challengers from the outside. Tanu was ecstatic and generously gave them 10 chances to try, but in fact, he just wanted to play a few more rounds with them. But the best result of those challengers was to desperately protect their 5,000 points, and then with the same number of troops and a more reasonable combination of troops, they narrowly defeated Tanu. Therefore, Tanu never thought that he would lose, and lose so miserably. If he wasn't just a stone door, this extremely shocking fact would have exploded his head on the spot. Fortunately, he didn't have a head now. What trick did you use? Wang Lu sneered, the chessboard is yours, the chess pieces are yours, and the dice are also yours. What trick can I use? As he said, he played with the chess pieces on the chessboard and asked, what do you think of my chess skills? Tanu said unwillingly, far better than me. Wang Lu said, then logically speaking, there are actually two possibilities. First, I'm too strong, and my talent in this kind of game has reached the realm of God, and no one can stop me. Second, it's not that I'm too strong, it's that you're too weak. I'm too weak. Tanu suddenly felt a sense of humiliation from being looked down upon. Don't go too far. Go too far? I actually didn't have much contact with your business simulation chess, and I'm not interested in it, so I'm definitely not good at it. Not to mention that the rules of your game are still the original version from 10,000 years ago, and there are many differences from what I've played, so I need some time to get used to it. Even so, I still defeated you with an overwhelming advantage. Is this really because I'm too strong? Speaking of which, where did you get the confidence to think that you're very good at chess? Tanu somewhat dejectedly said, before you, I've never tasted defeat in 10,000 years. Then there are two possibilities. First, you're very strong. Second, your opponents are too weak. Objectively speaking, what kind of people have been playing chess with you for the past 10,000 years? Are they the chess masters that Golden King collected from all over the continent? Or are they a group of ordinary people who have no interest in chess and can't stand your coaxing and pestering? And did the last trial taker who came here look like he was good at chess? But I've been playing here for 10,000 years. Wang Lu sighed, you've locked two men in a secret room, and even after 100,000 years, they still can't give birth to a child. It can be seen that time is not omnipotent. Moreover, when you play chess with a group of mediocre players, the more you play, the worse your chess skills will get. Your job is to be a military god, not a chess master. If you spend too much energy on this kind of heresy, you'll become a laughing stock just like the Night King who is obsessed with dark cuisine. The Night King who was obsessed with dark cuisine was shocked and angry at the same time. Hey! Chapter 332. No matter how unwilling the military god Tanu was a loss. In the past, the military god would never go back on his word in the game. Well, then, according to the agreement, you have a total of 25,000 logistic points. Please distribute your points freely. With that, on the stone platform that originally carried the chessboard, a complicated table appeared. All the units that could be exchanged and their detailed information were recorded on it. While looking at it, Wang Lu carefully calculated the optimal plan for the unit combination. However, halfway through the calculation, his eyes swept across a line on the table and was taken aback. Wait a minute, how come even I am printed on the table? Tunis said, of course. Don't tell me you won't participate in the battle? And if you participate in the battle, won't you consume your supplies? So that's how it is. Even the commander can't just watch from the sidelines. Tunis said, those commanders who don't even dare to come to the front line are not qualified to command the army of Golden King. I understand. Wang Lu nodded his head and didn't want to be entangled with him. Since the other party had set the rules, he just had to abide by it. However, when he saw his exchange price of 500 logistic points on the table, Wang Lu frowned. How come I don't know that I'm so valuable? I can buy 10 golden commanders. The exchange price is based on the strength of a person. You are worth 500 logistic points, that is to say, you alone are worth 10 golden commanders. Wang Lu thought for a moment. It seemed that it was not wrong to say that he could fight 10 golden commanders at the same time. Because even if he encountered 10 golden commanders, he would still be in an invincible position with his non-phase sword defense. However, 500 logistic points was still a bit expensive. Why not change it to someone else? It's okay to change people, but only those who personally set foot on the battlefield are eligible to pass the test. Those who watch the whole process from a safe place outside the battlefield will stay in a safe place forever. That is to say, let alone changing people, the 5 of us must go to the battlefield together to pass the test. And according to my price, the 5 of us will have to deduct at least 2,000 logistic points. Wang Lu thought for a moment. What about you? As the god of war of the barbarian race, how many logistical points will it take for you to personally go into battle? Tunis said confidently, of course it's 0 points. I'm just a stone gate now, and I have no combat ability at all. Even if I personally go into battle, I'm just a projection without any combat ability, so the logistical points are not counted at all. If you are envious, then beg Golden King to make you into a stone gate. Forget it, I'll just treat these 2,000 points as feeding the dogs. As Wang Lu spoke, he continued to scroll down the form, preparing to inquire about the detailed exchange prices of Aya and the others. However, he was stunned at a glance. This, 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros. 10,000 points. What kind of price is that? Wang Lu was furious. Are you the gate of the airport? How could the prices be so inflated? A mere Night King actually requires 10,000 logistics points? Tunu was also surprised, so expensive? It seems like your Night King has a great background. 10,000 points per unit, that's the price of a legend. Bullshit legend. Seeing that the other party's value was 20 times higher than his, Wang Lu was flustered and exasperated. He unceremoniously criticized and slandered, she's just a waste who can't even make Yuxiang shredded pork. I, the team leader, only have 500 points. I think giving her 300 is enough. Aya's face turned blue with anger. So that's what you really mean? Tunu explained, the price of this logistical point is mainly calculated according to the peak strength. Although this little girl is not in good condition at this time, if she returns to her peak state, she should be able to match a legend. Wang Lu unhappily snorted for a while and then accepted this explanation for the time being. Alas, a hero with low health is really useless. Instead of keeping her population, it's better to make up for it. Wang Lu said as he continued to look down the form. Then, once again, he flew into a rage. F***CK, were you attacked by Golden King because of your black heart? My Night King only has 10,000 points, but even Lu Li's price is 10,000? Does she deserve to be a legend? Or is it because she is close to Aya, so the price goes up? Tanu was also surprised. Her value is also 10,000 points. That doesn't make sense. Her real strength can only be regarded as intermediate high level, at most 1 or 2,000. Is it because of another reason? What? The logistical point, in essence, calculates the logistical consumption. Although, because of the trial, the price is based on a unit's combat strength, but its logistical consumption is also an important factor that affects the price. Perhaps, the reason why this girl's value is so high is because of the amazing logistical consumption? Wang Lu was dumbfounded, because what Tanu said was very likely. Lu Li's cultivation time was still short, so her potential was far from being displayed. In terms of strength alone, she was far from worthy of 10,000 logistical points. However, she could eat a lot. Damn it, what's the point of this? 2 women have already taken up 20,000 points, I have 500 points. Then Little Bai has 600 points, and the stupid dog has 2,400 points. Are you guys trying to rebel? Each one of you is so expensive. There are only 1,500 points left. At most, I can only buy a few laborers. Wait a minute, are those people who tried to pass the trial also based on this standard? They only have a total of 5,000 points, right? Tanu was somewhat embarrassed. The specific calculation is done by the spell mechanism that Golden King left here. If you're not convinced, why don't you talk to Golden King about it? Talk your ass. Are those Holy Light Religion challengers also based on this standard? Their total score is only 5,000 points, right? Tanu said, it's the same standard as yours. Among them, the most valuable legendary rank has 8,000 points, which is probably a bit lower than the average legendary rank. Therefore, he couldn't participate in that battle. Someone else led a large number of legions to participate in the battle. Wang Lu asked, but since those who don't participate in the battle can't pass the trial, then after that, Tanu explained, no, this rule is something that I made later. Because I found that the cheering faces of those onlookers were very hateful, so I simply forbade the onlookers to pass the trial. You can actually change the rules at will? Originally, I couldn't, but I don't know how I slowly could. Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh. Things that had been in disrepair for a long time were really not good. Letting this Tanu casually change the rules, the original intention of this trial to test strategy was completely gone. However, as long as he could pass the trial, why should he care about whether it was strategy or moral integrity? Forget it, 1,500 points is 1,500 points, I admit it. Wang Lu sighed and helplessly looked at Aya and Lu Li. It seems like I'm doomed to face the war of thousands of troops alone, because the rations of our thousands of troops have been eaten up by these 2 women. In the face of Wang Lu's naked resentment, although Aya felt wronged, she had nothing to say. Lu Li quietly hid behind Aya, not daring to look directly at Wang Lu's eyes, and then, as if burying one's ears while stealing a bell, stealthily took a bite of the pie. Regarding Lu Li's behavior, Wang Lu didn't even have the strength to be angry. After casually tapping a few times on the table and distributing the remaining 1,500 points, he sneered, it's nothing more than changing the strategy game to a matchless mowing the grass game. But as long as it's a game, even if it's a fujoshi, I will still pass it for you to see. Military god Tanu, bring it on. Good. Tanu let out a long laugh. His voice was filled with indescribable joy. Although the strength of the young man before him was not very strong, his heroic spirit made him somewhat sympathize with him. And for an opponent who sympathized with him, according to the rules of the barbarian tribe, he should use his greatest strength to defeat and crush the opponent. In the past, when he received the last batch of challengers, because he naturally hated the opposite party, he only used 80 to 90% of his strength, which gave them the chance to win by a narrow margin. But this time, in the face of Wang Lu, he must come up with 20% of his strength. Amidst the laughter, Wang Lu felt that everything in front of him began to distort and change. The narrow square in front of the door was replaced by a vast plain. On the other side of the plain were hundreds of golden guardians, and the phantom of the military god Tanu was surrounded by them. It was a barbarian giant with an astonishing imposing manner. His huge body and resolute face were like an immutable mountain rock. Outside the door, Tanu was still laughing and laughing, looking relaxed and cheerful. However, once he entered the battlefield, all the superfluous emotions were obliterated, leaving only the cold and harsh atmosphere. What a powerful military formation! In the face of the military god Tanu, who was only defeated by Golden King, Aya could not help but exclaim in admiration. As a leader, before the real battle, even if she just looked at the opponent's formation from afar, she could estimate the general strength. How is it compared to you? Wang Lu asked. Aya was silent for a moment. In terms of military formation alone, I am not as good as him. If you don't consider the strength of the commander, the gap between the two sides is about 8-10. Wang Lu was surprised. That's 20% better than you. That's true in terms of military formation alone, but if I really meet him, under fair conditions, I am confident that I can win. Wang Lu said, do you want to charge the enemy alone? Unfortunately, this time there is no enemy for you to fight. The other side is just a phantom, I'm afraid you can't kill him. If you want to win, the only way is to wipe out the enemy. Aya said, it's a pity that I'm still a bit far from being able to freely use my strength. I can do it with 1 or 2 sword strikes, but it's difficult to sustain. And it's impossible to destroy 400 golden guardians with just 1 or 2 sword strikes. In terms of attack and defense attributes alone, the golden guardians were close to the king pill level. And 400 golden guardians, under the command of a commander who was proficient in military formation, had unparalleled power. Unless Aya recovered to her peak state, she could barely suppress them with her real legendary power. But right now, in this kind of weak state, rushing forward was simply courting death. In addition to Aya, the others didn't have the capital to fight against 100 golden guardians. Therefore, Wang Lu nodded. In that case, let's change the way we play. Aya, you are the one who has led the army, so you will command the people behind us. Aya was surprised. The people behind us? You also exchanged the remaining 1,500 points for the army? Looking back, Aya was even more surprised, because behind them, there were 1,500 strong laborers silently waiting for orders. You actually exchanged them for laborers? Yes, laborers that can be exchanged with only 1 logistics point. They have the physical fitness of a middle-order profession and excellent production and construction ability. In the past, when Golden King went on an expedition to the savage land, he wanted to watch an opera on the way, so he let his hard workers build a magnificent and exquisitely carved theater in the Gobi Desert within an hour. The interior of the theater could accommodate tens of thousands of people. At that time, there were only 100 laborers responsible for the construction. Aya had also heard of this story. She was deeply impressed. Golden King's elite army is indeed a well-deserved reputation. But what's the use of so many laborers? Wang Lu lightly said, to build a tower. Chapter 333. Build a tower? When she heard Wang Lu's answer, Aya actually had a vague speculation in her heart. It was nothing more than using the strength of hard labor to quickly build a defensive tower. However, the more she thought about it, the more she couldn't figure it out. What kind of tower do you want to build? How do you want to build it? When do you want to build it? The first question was, what kind of defensive tower should be built in order to block the opponent? The opponent was 400 golden guardians whose strength was close to that of King Pill. When they were in a dense formation, they looked like ordinary infantry, but once the battle started, each of them could go up to the sky or down to the ground. Ordinary bunkers and defensive towers might have a miraculous effect in the mortal world, but here, they were meaningless. The full blow of the Golden Guardians could even destroy 10 towers. The second question was, even if Wang Lu had the god-level blueprint to build a super defensive tower that could withstand the Golden Guardians, what about the materials? A clever housewife can't cook without rice. No matter how capable Golden King's hard labor was, it was impossible for them to build an air tower, right? The third question was, even if Wang Lu could solve the material problem, what about the construction time? No matter how efficient Golden King's hard labor was, it was impossible for it to be completed in an instant, and would Tenna give him the time? The first question, you shouldn't ask me, you should ask these hard labor. They are the elite hard labor who are fortunate enough to serve Golden King and have undergone the most rigorous architectural training. It's impossible that they can't even build a few practical defensive towers, right? Besides, even if they can't, I still have a few dragon tower blueprints, which are enough to kill all living beings. Aya was shocked. Dragon tower blueprints? Where did you get the dragon tower blueprints? That's one of the top secrets of the Breton Dragon clan. Dragon Tower was a treasure-level building invented by a group of architecture-loving scholars in the heyday of the Breton Dragon clan. Dragon Tower had the ability to defend itself. Without manual operation, it could automatically identify the enemy and use various means to fight the enemy. Depending on the different building materials, the strength it could display would vary from a beginner to a high-order profession. Of course, the Dragon Tower that could be comparable to a high-order profession was so expensive that even the Dragon clan could not afford it. However, the lower-level Dragon Tower was very practical. For example, the Green Dragon Pagoda, which was the most cost-effective, could be built with materials that cost around 500 to 600 spirit stones, magic coins, but its power was enough to rival a cultivator at the peak of the foundation establishment stage and was close to the shoot-on stage. Even cultivators who had just entered the King Pill realm would have to avoid the concentrated fire of dozens of dragon pagodas. The only problem was that the technology required to build a dragon pagoda was too complex. Even among the dragon clan, the number of people who were proficient in construction could be counted on one's fingers. In Aya's era, the craftsmen who could build a dragon pagoda were almost extinct. In addition, Aya spent her entire life fighting, attacking more than defending, so this kind of defensive weapon was not very useful. Thus, the dragon pagoda blueprint was shelved. However, that was still a treasure of the dragon clan, one of the most valuable treasures in the inheritance. How did it fall into the hands of Wang Lu? Wang Lu said, of course, it was found in the treasure house of Dragon City. In the years that you were away, Bedivere, as the only remaining guardian of Breton Dragon clan, collected a lot of Dragon clan's heritage, and this Dragon Tower blueprint is one of them. Of course I know that. But, how could Bedivere let you into the treasure house? Aya was somewhat in disbelief. It's not that I don't trust you, but Bedivere should know what the Breton Dragon clan's heritage means. Except for me, even his wife is not allowed to enter the treasure house. Wang Lu said, I told him that I'm your gigolo. And then he let you in? Of course not. Bedivere is such a strict person, how could he break the rules just because I'm a mere gigolo? But I also told him that our child will be born next year, so I intend to give the child a gift, and also give you a big surprise. Upon hearing Wang Lu's explanation, Aya was petrified and motionless. Wang Lu said, so I asked him to recommend the good things in the treasure house, and he recommended the Dragon Pagoda blueprint. He said that if I can build a Dragon Pagoda according to the blueprint, even if it's the lowest level bone Dragon Pagoda, as the guardian of the newborn child, it will make you very happy. Now it seems like Bedivere has really made a great contribution. Aya didn't even have the strength to speak. As for your second problem, materials, it was also Bedivere who helped to solve it. Under the oppression of Holy Light religion, his biggest need is self-defense, and Dragon Pagoda is his first choice as a defensive weapon. Over the years, he has accumulated a lot of materials, but he has always lacked craftsmen who can build it. During this period, he reluctantly recruited some, but they were soon corrupted by Holy Light religion. And because of the secrecy of the construction of Dragon Pagoda, he didn't dare to let Holy Light religion know about it. Therefore, the construction has never been successful. At that time, when I asked for the blueprint, he also gave me a lot of materials. Fortunately, my mustard seed bag is big enough, ha ha ha. As for the third problem, the construction time is indeed a problem. What kind of person is Tanu? How could he not see through my trick? However, even if he can see through it, so what? As long as he personally goes into action, those mere puppets would be as vulnerable as clay chickens and pottery dogs. You personally go into action? Don't tell me you want to use your original magical ability to slow them down. That's impossible. The difference in strength is too big. The difference in strength is too big? Wang Lu smiled. I am in Shudan stage. During this period of time in the Western continent, I have made some progress, so I can barely be regarded as a high-level Shudan. But my real defense is invincible below Yuanying stage. And the opposite side is just a group of puppets suspected to be the king pill. Aya said, it's a group, not a single one. But, if they can't even break the defense, what's the difference between a group and a single one? Tanu is a master of military tactics, so it's impossible for his soldiers to be in a state of disunity. Once their power is integrated, with 400 people working together, even a Yuanying stage cultivator would not be able to face them head-on. Ha ha ha, do you think I will give them the opportunity to integrate their power? You underestimate the void spirit root too much. Even in the Western continent, I still have a way to make them in a state of disunity. No matter how great my ability is, I can't do it. Humph, it's time to show my real skill. Wang Lu. Aya furrowed her brows and inwardly lamented that she really couldn't see through him. Indeed, Wang Lu never did things that he was not sure of. His confidence now must have something to rely on. However, Aya could clearly see that Wang Lu didn't have enough strength to contend against 400 golden guardians. Both of them came down from the Spirit Sword Mountain, so Aya basically knew his cards. Don't worry, don't forget that I'm your way to win the war. Otherwise, let's make a bet. If I can single-handedly delay them long enough, you have to give me something. What do you think? Aya asked, what do you want? I haven't thought about it yet, why don't you put it on my tab first? Okay, it's a deal. Wait for me to come back. With that, Wang Lu no longer paid attention to Aya. His feet touched the ground and went straight to the other side of the plain, where the army of the military god Tanu was. He was really alone in facing thousands of troops. However, Tanu seemed to have predicted this. The moment Wang Lu set off, he issued an order. Disperse. With that order, the 400 golden guardians dispersed, never giving the opponent a chance to catch them all. In this regard, Wang Lu couldn't help but admire the opponent's caution and keenness. His plan to capture a large number of enemies with his original magical ability had failed before it even started. However, so what if the formation dispersed? Because his goal was not actually the Golden Guardians and Golden Warlocks, these miscellaneous soldiers. He went straight in with only one goal, Tanu himself. As long as he dealt with this military god, the 400 Golden Guardians would just be like a plate of loose sand, a fish on the chopping board. However, Tanu's phantom was indifferent to this, letting Wang Lu break into the formation with irresistible force. Some of the nearby Golden Guardians formed groups of 2 or 3 and cooperated to intercept him. Under the command of Tanu, these Golden Guardians cooperated with each other, which doubled their strength. However, they were all easily bounced off by the sword of Mount Kuan, completely unable to slow down Wang Lu's pace. As for Tanu himself, he led a few dozens of Golden Guardians and stood motionless, as if he was waiting for Chu Yunqing's arrival. From that pair of cold eyes, Wang Lu couldn't read any of the opponent's psychological fluctuations. Tanu in the state of the military god was like a precise clock. Every action of his had a clear purpose, and any external attack could not shake his stability. Therefore, Wang Lu couldn't even tell if Tanu had set a trap for him to fall into, or if he was just bluffing. However, no matter what it was, how could an arrow that had been shot go back? Wang Lu took a step forward and arrived in front of the army. In the middle of the army, Tanu also gently opened his mouth, ready to issue a new order. According to Wang Lu's guess, it was very likely that the whole army would attack, bypassing Wang Lu and directly attacking the 1,500 hard laborers. Because no matter what Wang Lu's battle plan was, the core and key was those hard laborers. As long as they were killed, no matter how many tricks Wang Lu had, he wouldn't be able to come up with them. It was a drastic response. And at this time, because the Golden Guardians were scattered, it was impossible for Wang Lu to lock all of them in his original magical ability, not to mention that with his current cultivation base, his original magical ability could not possibly contain hundreds of Golden Guardians at the same time. However, Wang Lu didn't come to fight head-on. He put his hand into his pouch, took out an exquisite gold medal and raised it up high. In the next moment, an astonishing aura and pressure suddenly burst out from the gold medal, like an invisible ripple sweeping out in all directions. In an instant, the sky of the entire battlefield seemed to be pressed down by a lot. A supreme majestic voice descended from the sky, shaking everyone's heart. "Bastards, kneel." At the same time, the army of military god Tanu knelt on the ground, without any resistance. Under this change, military god Tanu's complexion finally changed slightly. His sharp eyes pierced the gold medal. Apparently, he had seen through Wang Lu's trick. Unfortunately, if Tanu was not a phantom, but his real body, his gaze would be enough to pierce through the gold medal. Unfortunately, he was powerless at this time. On the battlefield, he was indeed the commander of an army, but the army under his command was, after all, someone else's army. Seeing that the battlefield quieted down in an instant, Wang Lu also gently breathed a sigh of relief. When I saw the dignified barbarian military god using the army of Golden King, I knew that it's time to show my real knockoff skills. Chapter 334. The gold medal was, of course, fake. The token that symbolized the supreme authority of Golden King, in the tens of thousands of years of rule of Golden King, only a few dozen pieces were issued. For Golden King, who loved absolute centralization of power, putting the authority in the hands of others was simply perverse and intolerable. Therefore, in history, only a few golden tokens were known as rare treasures with great research value and collection value. And any rare treasure, if it was known by a counterfeit grandmaster, there would only be one end. This gold medal had already been made when Wang Lu forged the Golden King's wine cup. The appearance of the gold medal was restored through a large number of historical materials, while the voice and aura of the Golden King were gradually imitated by Wang Lu in several conversations with the Golden King. Although there were not too many similarities, it did have a bit of the unique charm of the Golden King. Wang Lu raised the token high. Under the faint majesty that was vaguely similar to that of Golden King, the army of the military god Tanu collapsed on the spot. All of them knelt on the ground, and no one dared to get up. The army of Golden King couldn't even recognize the token of their lord. This was undoubtedly a tragedy, but it was also an unavoidable tragedy, because for these puppets, the nature of obedience overwhelmed everything. If it was the real army of Golden King, they would never be fooled so easily. Unfortunately, after tens of thousands of years, the brave men who once followed Golden King were only the remains of the puppets, and these puppets had never seen their king since they were born. For Wang Lu, this scene meant that his tactic was a great success, and the counterfeit skill had once again created a miracle. Of course, the counterfeit thing was not glorious, but if the counterfeit could also play the role of the real thing, then whether it was real or fake was no longer important. Wang Lu held the token high and no longer said a word. He just silently let these golden guards kneel down. This gold medal was, after all, a fake. It could only scare these puppets by surprise. But after a long time, no matter how stupid the puppets were, they would still be able to see the clues. Therefore, it was better to talk less. In any case, the historical Golden King was not known for being talkative. Time slipped away bit by bit. Wang Lu quietly held the token. In front of him, the 400 scattered golden guards, 30 golden warlocks, and 8 golden commanders were quietly kneeling on the ground. Their foreheads were deeply buried in the soil, not daring to look directly at the light that belonged to the Golden King. Only Tanu remained standing, quietly waiting for the time to pass. For this precise war machine, feudal resistance was just a waste of time. He had asked the Golden Guardians to stand up several times, but he did not get any response, so he gave up trying. In any case, the effects of the counterfeit wouldn't last for too long. As time passed, the puppets would eventually notice that something was amiss. As expected, about 4 to 6 hours later, one of the commanders moved slightly and started to waver. For the loyal puppets, being able to kneel in front of the Golden King's token was a great gift. Under normal circumstances, even if they collapsed, they would not dare to move. But now, it was obvious that they began to doubt the authority of the gold medal. The commander of the legion had a higher degree of wisdom. Soon, the second and third commanders began to waver. After a while, they simply stood up and glared at Wang Lu. Their eyes were like burning lava. Forging the Golden King's token was undoubtedly a blasphemy, an unforgivable blasphemy. Roar! One of the commanders roared to the sky. The angry sound waves swept across, causing all the golden guards to tremble. They slowly stood up and raised their heads. Their eyes became even more confused. Seeing this scene, Wang Lu smiled, threw away the token, and then turned away. Behind him was a jungle of steel and rocks. Ha ha ha, welcome to my tower defense world. Hundreds and thousands of defense towers of different shapes were intertwined into a complex maze. The dark and solid bone dragon tower, the deep blue-green dragon tower, the manic and unruly red dragon tower, the mysterious black dragon tower, and the holy and radiant holy dragon tower. At this moment, the crystallization of Breton dragon clan's wisdom was undoubtedly revealed. Hundreds and thousands of dragon towers stood side by side, their imposing manner connected, as if it was really an ancient dragon's cave. Even if they were only looking at it from a distance, it made people feel suffocated. This was a real land of death. Even if it was the Golden Guards under the command of the military god Tanu, if they dared to enter the jungle of the defense towers, they would still die. Perhaps before these defense towers were formed, they could disintegrate the opponent with a casual impact, but they had wasted too much time. God of War Tanu, don't just stand there, come and fight to the death. We only have 5 people. If you can rush over, you will win. At this time, Wang Lu had walked into the encirclement of the defense towers and reunited with Aya and the others, while those hard workers had disappeared without a trace. Previously, in order to speed up the work, Wang Lu had ordered them to burn their lives just like the painstaking writer whose deadline was tomorrow but had not written a single word. In one sentence, these amazingly efficient workers burst out with a heaven-defying speed. In just a few hours, they had built a jungle of steel and rocks in a blank space. When the jungle of the defense towers was finally built, the huge building materials in the mustard seed bag were exhausted, and even the mountain not far away was hollowed out. These hard workers finally reached the last moment of their lives. As if they had been burned out, they vanished in a puff of smoke. And the defense towers they left behind were like towering tombstones. In this regard, after a moment of astonishment, a faint smile unexpectedly appeared on the face of the military god Tanu. At this point, even if the military god Tanu's military tactics were twice as powerful, it was impossible for him to rush down the jungle of defense towers with his more than 400 infantrymen. If the commanders were replaced, it would be more likely to be a super long-range artillery. But since the defeat had been decided, the outcome was not so important. Tanu was more concerned about the means by which Wang Lu won. Interesting. This was a heartfelt praise. He had seen too many scenes in his life, but the scene in front of him still made him feel fresh. Very interesting tactics, very interesting opponents. Strictly speaking, Wang Lu had an unfair advantage because he did not show any talent in strategy at all. However, Tanu had never been a person who was too obsessed with victory and defeat. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to survive as a guardian in the Golden King's treasure house for tens of thousands of years. You win this round, Tanu said. Wang Lu was surprised. You just give up like that? Tanu said, if I have a 1% chance of winning this battle, I will definitely fight it out. But since it's not even 1%, I really don't need to let these soldiers die in vain. In the endless years to come, only they can accompany me. Wang Lu nodded and said no more. After the military god Tanu admitted defeat, a dark door opened behind him. Go, I wish you good luck. When Wang Lu and the others walked through the door and stepped on the shining stairs to the next level, the door slowly closed. At this time, Wang Lu, who was walking at the front of the team, suddenly felt something. He looked back and saw the collapsed world through the gap of the door. On the battlefield just now, the sky was broken, the earth was collapsing, and huge cracks opened up, like the mouth of a wild beast, tearing and swallowing the world little by little. The military god Tanu stood in the middle of the army, his posture like a pine tree, calmly welcoming the end of the world. Is this what the so-called endless years refer to? Wang Lu could not help but be stunned. And Aya, who was behind Wang Lu, felt Wang Lu's gaze and also looked back. At this time, the door suddenly closed. What a pity, if there is another chance, I really want to have a fair fight with him. Aya said regretfully. Yes, what a pity. Wang Lu said softly. At the same time, in the depths of the king's treasure house, Paul was shocked and angry, and the uneasiness in his heart had reached the limit. They actually passed. They have passed the 3rd level. He saw the process of Wang Lu passing the level with his administrator authority. At first, he still held a glimmer of hope that Wang Lu would be defeated in front of the military god Tanu. After all, that was a really powerful opponent. If it weren't for Faceless, his road of trial would have ended here. And after Faceless, Tanu modified the rules and became even more difficult to defeat. With Paul's knowledge, he couldn't even think of a way to defeat him. However, as Wang Lu broke through the difficulties again and again with miraculous means, Paul's heart gradually sank. Especially when Wang Lu took out the counterfeit gold medal and forced the Golden Guardians to kneel down, Paul was even more enraged and cursed. Unfortunately, everything was useless. Wang Lu and the others had already walked on the brilliant staircase and would soon reach the 4th level. And when Paul was full of irritation and even faintly frightened, a gentle and friendly voice said with a smile, "Rest assured, their footsteps stop here. In the 4th level, we will end everything." Unfortunately, Faceless One's comfort could not warm people's hearts. And just at this time, a cold voice questioned. End everything? Just by relying on you waste? The one who questioned was a warrior in a blood-colored heavy armor. The warrior's hands were leaning on a serrated greatsword, and his whole body was covered with a gloomy and chilling smell of blood. He was the Supreme Inquisitor of Holy Light Religion, the one with the highest number of purified people in the church, Duke Ferdinand. When Wang Lu and the others spent most of the day on the 3rd level, the Supreme Inquisitor finally left them behind and returned to the Holy City alone as fast as he could. At this time, although he was extremely tired, his fighting spirit was still high. Especially when he witnessed Wang Lu break through the 3rd level, which seriously threatened the position of Holy Light Religion in the king's treasure house, he was filled with anger from the bottom of his heart. Heretics who dare to covet my church's holy place must be purified with the most severe punishment. Among the church's 5 legendary saints, the most devout and the most powerful one was undoubtedly the Pope, followed by the Supreme Inquisitor. His fanaticism for the church was almost distorted. 50 years ago, because his daughter fell in love with a heretic, he personally cut off his daughter's head and hung it at the front door of the Inquisitor. As for that heretic, no one knew his whereabouts, and no one wanted to know. With such a deformed and strong belief, Ferdinand naturally loathed the mediocre and incompetent Paul. He always thought that Paul would slow down the church's pace of development, so it was best to cut him down and replace him with a smarter person. Unfortunately, he never got what he wanted. As for Faceless One, a few years ago, he was very optimistic about this ruthless church's sharp knife. Although he didn't have much contact with him, Faceless One's brilliant record made him quite commendable. Unfortunately, after seeing him this time, Ferdinand's heart ignited with anger. Faceless One, do you want to join the fight in this shameful posture? In the eyes of the Supreme Inquisitor, Faceless One's weakness could not be hidden. Not long ago, he was seriously injured by the Night King's sword strike, and now he has not fully recovered. This seriously injured avatar was not even as good as a beginner profession. Participating in the fight would only drag the others down. However, in response to this, Faceless One just glanced at Ferdinand, completely unfazed by this holy one who was above him. He lightly said, "It's none of your business, who do you think you are? Did I invite you? Did I invite you to express your opinion? You!" Ferdinand flew into a rage. His serrated greatsword emitted a red light. He couldn't help but want to make his move. If you want to make your move, then go ahead. Kill my avatar, and then use your poor brain to think of tactics to intercept the 9 regions' people. If you succeed, all the credit will be yours. The Sea of Holy Light will certainly favor you. I wish you good luck. Faceless One's tone was sarcastic. He simply didn't put Ferdinand in his eyes. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.